Welcome to Armchair Expert, Experts on Expert. I'm Dax Shepard. I'm joined by Emmy-nominated Monica Pladman.
Hi.
Do you think I'll say Pladman so frequently some people will start thinking your name is Pladman?
I'm nervous about that.
You are?
Yeah.
For endorsement deals and such?
Yeah. Well, sure. I got to look out for myself.
You got a brand to protect. We have an awesome guest today, Jonathan Safran Foer. He is a novelist. He's written a bunch of big books. Everything Is Illuminated, Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close, Eating Animals, Tree of Codes, Here I Am, and his new book, We Are the Weather, Saving the Planet Begins at Breakfast. You know, I really enjoyed Jonathan.
Me too. It was really interesting. He has a very cool story.
He has an incredibly cool story.
I wouldn't say cool, actually. Traumatic.
Ooh.
Oh, we got a
military
copter.
chopper. Invasion. What's crazy is everything just fell apart. I heard a military chopper, looked out the window to see what it was, see a huge bug crawling on the window. Now I'm panicking about a bug infestation.
I saw that earlier.
You did?
Yeah.
And you didn't say anything.
No.
That's okay. Well, Jonathan, he has a certain energy.
Yeah.
It was so soothing for me.
Oh, yeah.
And we joined his energy, which I love when that happens on the podcast.
That's true.
He was like, no, I'm going to be me and you'll meet me there. And we did. And I loved it.
Me too.
He also really got into my craw about my ethics a little bit.
Uh-oh. Well, not because of him. He just made you think.
He made me think, And he made me realize I could do better and I probably need to make an attempt to do better.
Yeah.
Anyways, he's incredibly fascinating and he's got a really great message and he's just a really interesting guy. Really enjoy talking to him and I hope you guys enjoy Jonathan Safran Foer.
He's an armchair expert. He's an armchair expert. He's an armchair expert.
How are you doing? Are you tired?
No, I feel good.
You do feel good.
I feel great, yeah.
But you came in from Toronto.
Yep.
And you're on a book tour.
Mm-hmm.
You know, what's interesting about writers, I think, in general is that, and by the way, this extends to actors on some level as well, is like you hire them because they have this skill set, which is they can pretend they're something or they can memorize lines. I'm not sure what the skill set is. But then you're then required or expected to go sell this product, which those aren't necessarily the same skill set. And quite often they're opposite skill sets. And I would say it's even more compounded by being a writer, which is a very solitary activity.
Totally. I mean, actors have charisma.
Well,
some.
They have something like charisma, all of them.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of writers become writers precisely because they suck at selling themselves in real life.
Yeah,
you
it's
know?
kind of true.
And then yet writers are then asked to go on book tours and promote their product. And I got to imagine whatever anxiety an actor has, it's just got to be times 5 for a writer.
Yeah.
But some people, is there anyone, and I'm thinking of someone specifically, and I'm wondering if you'll have the same, is there anyone that you think does a very artful job of being a public version of themselves as a writer?
An artful job, like they succeed at it, or like I respect it?
Like they're almost as interesting as their writing, if not more. You know who I'm
I
thinking
do,
of.
yeah.
You're talking to him right now.
Well, that's what I think I'm going to find out, which is exciting. But Let's say David Sedaris.
David Sedaris, there's like no line between who he is as a person, who he is as a writer.
That's true.
Which is great. I mean, it's why I like him very much as a person and as a writer.
Yeah.
And he can do public readings where he really holds court and takes you on a ride, right?
Yeah.
Just verbally and in the moment.
Yeah. His signings last like no joke, they can last like 6 hours. 8 hours. The reading, as I understand, I've never been to one of his readings, but the readings are like an hour. And that's just like the appetizer. And then everybody's there for the interaction with him afterwards. And it just goes on forever. And he hugs every single person, takes a picture with every single person, makes a doodle for every single person.
And he writes something that would kill any other person's career in the book. Like we had him on and he would say like he'd written in someone's book, like, I hope you get raped in the ass. And it's like, well, there's very few people that can write that sentence in America and be totally good.
Yeah. Trump
and Sedaris.
That's true.
I once, for one of my books, they sent me to the warehouse to sign. I signed like 8,000 in one day. And then they mailed those to bookstores all over the country, so it could say autographed copy, whatever. And he was the guy who was there before me, a day or two before. And they have a wall that you write on afterwards. And you say, like, thanks so much, or boy's my hand tired.
Yeah.
And his was something like, 53 years of jerking off made me king at this, whatever. And it was in this conservative place in the Midwest, and they painted over it with white.
They did.
So his shit doesn't fly everywhere.
Yeah.
It's just very interesting in culture who's in trouble and who's not in trouble. And I think largely what I'm circling as an idea is if you're hiding something, it's a story. And if you're not hiding something, it's not a story. Do you think that's possibly part of the equation?
I think it is possibly part of the equation. I mean, Trump is sort of proof of that.
Yeah.
In a way.
Yeah, it's all out loud.
Yeah, he just is what he is. There's no shame. There's no concealing it.
Yeah.
Sedaris also doesn't live in America. And I think
That's
for
true.
whatever reason, he's sort of subject to different rules because of that.
Yeah, I imagine it's liberating. Now, you grew up in D.C.
Yeah.
And you have learned parents?
Not really.
No?
Fully ignorant parents.
Oh, but professional and degrees and stuff, yeah.
They have degrees. They bounced around through a lot of different jobs. My mom, she worked in PR for a while. And for the last 10 or 15 years, she sort of found her calling running this, sort of like the 92nd. Do you know what the 92nd Street Y is?
No.
Mm-mm.
Shame on you.
Tell us.
It's a kind of like literary arts community center on the Upper East Side. They have a Jewish day school, but it's also where if like a writer's coming to New York, they'll probably do an event at the 92nd Street Y.
Oh, okay.
So she ran something like that in D.C. that was in an old, what once was a synagogue, then was a Baptist church, and now is this center where they host cultural events.
Yeah.
And my dad was trained as a lawyer.
Yeah.
And then my grandfather started a jewelry store in D.C., and he died of a heart attack very, very suddenly. My dad had to step in, just ended up doing that for a long time. He started something called the American Antitrust Institute, and that is a...
He wanted to break up big conglomerates?
Yeah.
Really?
This sort of think tank, but it was like a think tank of one, really. He ran it out of our house in D.C.
Uh-huh.
My dad's like an old-fashioned liberal.
Uh-huh.
Just like believes what he believes and fights as hard as he can. He had a surgery, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago. He had like a stint, is that what it's called?
Sure.
Put into
An artery.
artery in his neck. And everybody in the family, it wasn't particularly dangerous, but we all gathered to be there. And when he woke up, we were all standing around, my mom, my two brothers, eyes like opened one at a time. We were like, Dad. And he said, we really got him. And we said, what? He's like, the bastards, the monopolies, we got them. And that was like his first thought upon returning to consciousness.
And where do you think his desire to topple the monopolies started? Was he subject, or was his father subject to some kind of strong arming by a multinational conglomerate or
not
something?
at all. I think it's like sometimes in life you just pick up a pet issue for whatever reason.
Uh-huh. Was there a villain in his worldview?
The villains have changed as the monopolies have changed.
Okay, sure.
He's not nuts about Amazon. He's not nuts about Facebook.
It may be in the 80s when you were a kid, like GE maybe, or...
Well, so he didn't get into this until 2000, something like that.
Okay.
So it was a good time to get into that.
Yeah, the tech boom.
that's
That
true.
was a racket.
How's he feel about Facebook? Probably not great.
He doesn't feel great about Facebook. Anything that has a name that we would all recognize, he doesn't feel great about.
That makes sense.
Although, what about Costco? I think that's a really good company.
They're big fans of Costco.
Okay, that makes
Oh.
sense.
In fact, they are. But,
Yeah.
there's a difference between being a fan in life and practice and being a fan conceptually.
Uh-huh.
So they buy plenty of shit from Amazon as well,
Well,
just like everybody else.
Yeah,
course.
you have to.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, that is in fact the problem with monopolies is you end up doing a lot of things you wish you weren't doing because it doesn't feel like there are other ways of doing them anymore.
Yeah, now I have a kind of anti-progressive view on some monopolies based solely on reading Titan and being obsessed with John D. Rockefeller, and then recognizing that his goal for his monopoly was literally to stabilize the rate of lamp oil. It was $10 a gallon one day, then it was 5 cents, and someone needed to do something, and then ultimately everyone benefited from that thing. So I've seen a version of it where I'm like, well, I don't know. I guess there's versions.
To be honest, it's nothing I know a hell of a lot about.
You don't care. You didn't inherit that.
I care a little, but I don't care a lot.
Right. Okay. That's fair.
Yeah.
And Judaism's a big component of your childhood and your life. Is that accurate?
Not from a religious family.
Okay.
At all. I went to Hebrew school, but it's just kind of part and parcel with where I came from.
Mhm.
Everybody I knew went to Hebrew school. I didn't go to a Jewish school, but it was effectively Jewish. It sure seemed like everybody who went there was Jewish.
Yeah.
And definitely a very culturally Jewish atmosphere. Kinds of friends I grew up with, the kinds of stories I was told, TV we watched.
And grandmother on your mom's side was a Holocaust survivor.
Yeah, and in fact, my mom was born in Europe.
Oh, she was?
Born, and spent her first couple of years in a DP camp, and then came to America when she was 4.
It would be nearly impossible for you not to have inherited the weight and stakes of what it means to be Jewish on planet Earth, right?
I think that's right, but, there are things that you don't believe that they're true until you're presented with evidence, like a moment in a trial when the prosecutor waves the bloody glove and says, like, well, the defendant's been telling us that he couldn't have been at the crime scene. And the defendant's telling us he would have no motive to do this horrible act. But his blood's on the glove, so.
Yeah.
And I've had a lot of moments like that with Jewish identity where, you're asking me what my identity is, and I'm not even sure I'm the best person to answer the question. Like,
right.
I don't walk around feeling the identity, but I do walk around doing things that would suggest the identity is important to me.
Well, isn't that so often the case? It's like we have an ideology of who we are, and then if an anthropologist, a garbologist goes through our trash, they'll likely know a lot more about us than we're keenly aware of. Yeah.
Is that word garbologist?
Yeah, that's a
lot.
sub, and it was started because one specific ethnology they were doing of this town, they were trying to figure out the diet of the town and what mothers, this was I think in the 50s, were feeding their children. And when questioned, they would say, "Oh, I cooked a meatloaf on Monday, and then I made a casserole on Tuesday, blah 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 blah." And then one of them had the idea of like, let's go through the town dump and look at what's in the trash. And if you looked at the trash, there was like, umpteen thousand boxes of Kraft macaroni and cheese. There was all this stuff, and they quickly realized, like, well, this can't all be true at the same time, and it created a whole field called garbology and anthropology. And even when they're looking at remains in the archaeological record, so much of what they're going through is just the trash site where they were putting all their crap. That's what they're figuring out from that.
It's like that bizarrely sexy scene in Jurassic Park when Laura Dern goes elbow deep in the dinosaur crap.
Oh, sure.
And
Yeah.
like, oh, she was just having her period or whatever it was. I can't remember what the discovery was. God, I should go watch that after this.
Yeah. I grew up in an area of Michigan adjacent to West Bloomfield and Bloomfield Hills, Michigan, which is incredibly high concentration of Jewish folks. And many people just went to school as if we had sent our kid to a private school, we'd just be like, well, whatever private schools, I guess, affordable that our friends are going to. And I think that's often the case of how you end up right at a, quote, Jewish pre-K or something.
Yeah. So, again, my school was not Jewish.
Right.
I went to a school called Georgetown Day, which is like...
But that's high school, or that was K through 12?
I went there pretty much K through 12. Yeah, I went to public school through 4th grade, something like that. And then it became hard to stay in the public school system for junior high. So when my older brother switched, I just went with him.
Yeah, and you're a middle child.
Yeah, 3 boys.
Okay, 3 boys.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I'm a middle child, but there's a gal below me. What is the age gap between these?
So my older brother is 2.5 years older. My younger brother's 5.5 years younger.
So is brother like quintessential older brother? Is he like firstborn? Are you guys falling into that pattern at all? Are you a lost child in your bedroom? There's a baby and there's a teenager and there's really no air left for you?
I don't know. My older brother is a very, very warm, he is a big brother type. And I think he's a big brother to people that are not even his brothers. He's the kind of guy you go to. He edited a magazine for years, The New Republic, and he's just like a trustworthy guy, very stable,
even keel.
Yeah, a good guy.
A good guy.
A mensch, yeah.
Oh, so he was kind to you as a little brother.
He really was. We didn't.
What is that like?
I threw a joystick at his head once, and that's literally the only strife I can remember from our childhood. But that is its own slightly odd thing, I suppose. Like, just to return to what you were touched on with being the grandson of a survivor, the son of a survivor as well. There are a lot of ways to deal with trauma, like historical familial trauma. And one of them is to like really emphasize what's good and not talk so much about what's difficult or bad. Because relative to that historical trauma, like, what are you complaining about? What's the big deal?
That to me is what I would get a chip on my shoulder about, because I think of this in terms of I'm in AA and I go to a meeting at someone's house and it's mostly private airplane problems, right? And on the surface, I could go like, oh, what the fuck are these people complaining about? But my conclusion is like, we as a species, we're going to ruminate on shit and it doesn't really matter. It's just the suffering of the wanting of some different state of mind or being. And that's all relative. So it's like, you'll find some issues in Eden. And so to constantly have your concerns be diminished by this historical event that'll never be topped doesn't feel entirely fair to a kid either.
Completely agree. I couldn't
really?
agree more strongly. Yeah.
Oh,
I mean, like your pain is your pain.
Yeah.
You know, whatever the referent is. It's funny. I remember when my older son was really little, my kid tripped or something like that. And I did you're okay. It's all right. You're fine. You know, hop up. And I said to my dad, God, you know, I think I could talk him out of pretty much any pain. Like, I think there's a way to say, it's not that bad. You're all right. Come on, let's get out. Oh, you're great at dealing with this. Oh, man, you're so brave.
Yeah.
And he said, you probably could, but then you're not letting him be himself.
Right.
Like, you're not letting him experience pain, which is part of the human drama. When we repress like really fundamental parts of the human drama, we can get in big trouble.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yes, I totally agree.
But it was interesting. My grandmother, who is the matriarch of our family and really the sun around which everything orbited, she passed away last year. In the last year of her life, she kind of came into her body in a way that I had never witnessed before. And we came into a physical relationship in a way that I'd never had with her before. She, like a stupid example, which maybe isn't stupid at all, but felt really poignant, is she started to eat tons of chocolate in the last year of her life.
Oh,
She started listening to
interesting.
lots of music. I'd never seen her do either of those things.
Oh, wow.
And this was in the context of her body giving out. She kind of
Yeah.
entered into her body. And, I was very, very close with her. I received who knows how many tens of thousands of kisses, from her.
Yeah.
But I never kissed her, actually. It was just something that wasn't done
Uh-huh.
in my family, which was just as loving as they come. I mean, it still is. Like, I have a wonderful relationship with my parents and with my brothers. It's not a lot of physical affection, which may be a kind of something Jewishy wartime residual about it. Like, almost if you expose yourself too much to love, then you acknowledge what can be lost.
You're also showing your cards to the people around you who are preying upon any weakness. It is
Yeah, it
weirdly
feels-
a display of your vulnerability.
I think you're right. And it's funny because if you think about what is the Jewish residue of trauma, it's humor. And most of that humor is like, I'm going to punch myself in the face before you punch me in the face.
Right.
You think you can make fun of me? I can definitely make fun of me better than you can make fun of me,
Yeah.
which is, I suppose, a kind of perverted safety. Anyway, it feels like the opposite of giving a kiss, like to make a joke at your own expense.
Yeah, and I have no data to support this. It's all anecdotal, but having worked in this business for 15, 20 years, a disproportionate amount of Jewish comedy writers, it's a very significant
lot,
chunk. I want to say in the 30% range of writers on staff at TV shows, and yet Jewish Americans make up, I don't know what it is, 2% of the population or something less. We tried to figure that out at one point. But yeah, it is interesting. There's a couple, the Canadians too, they do very well in comedy in this country.
That's harder to explain.
Well, my theory on that is they are close enough to understand everything, and yet they are outside enough to have some pretty great observations about us. It's like they can pass as us, but yet they have a different lens that they're seeing us through.
Could be. They probably also have a better education system than we have.
Yeah.
There may be something. I was in Amsterdam just a couple weeks ago, and somebody explained the design sensibility of the Scandinavians, which is the best in the world. It's people who live in their own houses arrange little objects in their windows, and everything is like a little diorama, a little museum exhibit. And so much of the great design of the 20th century was made by Scandinavians. And it was explained to me that it was so unpleasant outside. It's very dark, it's very cold, it's very rainy,
Yeah.
that all of the emphasis is put inside.
Yeah.
And so one can put the emphasis inside physically, like arranging things, making beautiful things, making a house comfortable, or you can do it, emotionally or intellectually.
Yeah, they have a word, right, it would translate basically to warmth.
Higa, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah,
higa.
yeah.
I'm sure my pronunciation's a bit off.
Yeah, and that
Yeah.
drives the aesthetic and all the decisions is this.
Yeah.
And then they have another word too, right, which is the perfect amount. They're obsessed with not too much and not too little, which I think
I don't know.
Yeah, I think is an amazing pursuit.
Pig is a real thing. I mean, have you ever changed like a texture in some place that you really care about, or given thought to like trying to be close to a fireplace, for example, or using like wall lights instead of overhead lights, or even, I mean, it sounds so pretentious and precious to talk about, but using a candle instead of an electric light. I don't really want to be necessarily that guy who like has candles all over the house, but I bet if I were, I'd be happier. I'd be mellower, you know.
Well, I can tell you the example that immediately comes up to me is my wife collects damaged dogs. And, you know, we got one now that it pees every single day in the house. And so we've had to basically get rid of any fucking rugs in our house because they all smell. And I hate our living room now. I've hated it for 4 months.
Feels harsh.
It does, because it's just a wood floor now. And I'm like, I hate this room. That little bit of fabric was making the difference between whether me loving the living room for 15 years or now hating it.
I've had similar experiences. I got divorced about 7 years ago. And the first thing I bought afterwards when I was moving homes was this incredibly soft rug. It was like the kind of thing where like you could drop a deck of cards in it and lose it because it's that thick and
deep,
hairy. Yeah. And like, you know, you go up to your shins when you walk on it. And I have 3 dogs now in my house, and they think it's outside. Like it's that,
How could they not?
soft and nice. And so they piss and crap. And I can't even blame them for it.
Yeah.
It does become like a little bit of a Sophie's choice.
Yeah, your physical environment is a huge impact on your mood. I know, because I have seasonal affective disorder, self-diagnosed.
Yeah.
But it is so funny how different every day could be the exact same of what you're doing. But if it's bright outside or if it's gloomy outside, the mood is so shifty.
Yeah.
It's fascinating.
Yeah. We're sensitive little creatures.
Very.
Some of us more than others.
That's true.
Okay, so I went, my mother, single mother, 3 kids, took us on a trip to D.C. to see the monuments and whatnot, and we were on a very tight budget, and we stayed at a place that was very, very scary. That kind of was my memory of D.C. for a long, long time, and then we went back, my wife and I, for like the White House Correspondents' Dinner or something, and I was like, this place is beautiful. It's like Europe, but all that to say, DC in the 80s was a little dicey, was it not? I mean, it was
Yeah, DC was the murder capital of America for quite a long time.
Yeah.
I think it's still near the top, but DC is an unusual city because it's very divided. It's very racially segregated, and it's very segregated by economics as well. And it's also separated by the federal parts and by the sort of neighborhood parts, the transient population that comes when there's a new administration, and people like my parents and grandparents on my dad's side who've just been there for a long time, didn't work in government, live in these kind of old-fashioned neighborhoods. And that was how I grew up. Yeah. I wasn't anywhere near the monuments or any of that kind of stuff. It was people whose like parents and grandparents lived in the same area, kids went to the same schools that their parents went to, and it was a great place to be a kid, a really good place. You know, my brother and I had 2 or 3 public parks within a walking distance. We could walk everywhere. We walked to school. You know, we had like summer jobs. It feels like something that doesn't even exist anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, we had someone in who had grown up in an area of New York that was kind of similar to the area of Michigan I grew up in, and I was like, yeah, Halloween. Like, did you go to the cider mill around this time of year? And she was like, oh my God, yes, the cider mill. And then we started talking about field parties and fucking like a real hayride and all that kind of stuff. And I thought, yeah, wow, my kids are not going to have any of that.
No, we played football on the lawn on Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
Down to the mall meaning where the monuments are. On the 4th of July, we would all get drunk or get high and lay on our backs and watch the fireworks like fall down on us. Could sneak into the grounds of different embassies and like romp. It was a good place, but it's changing.
Now, you went to this Georgetown day school. Yeah. It's affiliated with the university, I assume?
No.
Oh, it's not?
No, that's Georgetown Prep, which is where Kavanaugh went. Very, very different scene.
Okay.
My school was really progressive. You call the teachers by their first names. Teachers would smoke in class.
Oh, good for them.
Yeah.
Have sex with the students?
For only that. That was part of the curriculum. No, very, very liberal, mellow place, not associated with anything but itself.
Now, why did you then aspire to go to Princeton and not Georgetown? No reason you wanted to get out of there or what?
I didn't really aspire to go to Princeton. I aspired to go to other places that I didn't get into.
Oh, like where? Where did you not get into?
Like Harvard and Yale.
okay.
And now the question is, why would I even aspire for that?
Well, that's obviously my next
I don't know
question.
why. That was like, every kid has expectations, some of which are like explicit, some of which are subtle or invisible, most of which are invisible and subconscious. And I guess there's a trajectory that my family took from like everybody but my grandmother being murdered. She came to the States. They started managing grocery stores and living above the grocery stores that they managed. My grandmother clipped coupons till the day she died. And her life's dream, which she accomplished, was to send her kids to school, to college, which she did. And then my parents, like, inherited a lot of that ethic of let's give our kids the best education that they can get and let them fulfill a kind of American dream, which is basically to have more than your parents had.
Yeah.
This is part of the problem we're facing right now in the country.
Oh, that's over. Yeah. My
and
kids
globally.
won't do half of what I've done. Guaranteed.
Yeah. And they shouldn't.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it's not a good dream. The American dream is not a good dream.
No. I know. You got to get it, though, to realize that, don't you?
Well, we're going to have to figure out a way for that not to be the case because it's unsustainable in every single sense.
Sure. So what I hear there is that on some level, you're kind of living out a previous generation's wishes. You must be aware of the impact you getting into one of those schools will be and how you'll have been fulfilling everyone's dream. In my case, I had a mother who really believed in me. I mean, like, preposterous levels of what she thought I was capable of, which was awesome. I wouldn't trade it for the world. But what it also did for me was I got good at compartmentalizing. So I was living out some expectation, and then I had another side of Dax no one really knew about, which ultimately caught up with me by the time I turned 30. But did you have any kind of split personality stuff going on? Did you have like a secret Jonathan that was for you?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I can't imagine that there's anybody who doesn't have some version of what you just said. I wouldn't trust somebody who didn't have some version of what you just said. Like an exterior and an interior life that aren't really matching, or kind of like alienation from oneself. We're so used to talking about alienation from others, but I think much more powerful is an alienation from oneself. Like the knowledge that this isn't exactly me. This me that I'm walking around performing. Yeah. Sometimes it is. Sometimes the overlaps are like pretty complete, but there's an awareness that there's just somebody else that you are. Yeah. And I had that. It wasn't explicit. Like it wasn't secretly gay or secretly an addict or anything like that. But I was secretly somebody a little bit different than I presented myself as. And it's taken me a long time to figure that out, what it means, because it can be really subtle and hard to articulate. Yeah. But it's also impossible to miss. If you are experiencing that distance, you know it. Yes. I think that it's so hard when you're younger to even know that this is happening because you don't have a life to compare your life to. But as you get older and things start to branch and you meet different people, you have different kinds of experiences, life has different chapters, then you can look back and say, oof, this is this thing that was happening to me at that time. And for me, often it's when I feel the relief of the end of that kind of alienation that I can recognize what it was that I had in the first place.
Stay tuned for more Armchair Expert, if you dare.
Something happened to you when you were 8.
Yeah. The way we used to do it is you would go to school until the last day of the school year. Then you'd start summer camp at the same school and just do that through the summer. And it really resembled school. And I was in it was called a talented and gifted program, but there was no threshold of talent and giftedness that you had to exceed to get in. Just anyone who wanted to was sufficiently talented and gifted. And it was the first day of that camp. The first period, in fact, was a science class, and we were making sparklers for the 4th of July, which was at the end of the first semester.
I mean, can I interject? I mean, we already know the story is going to end up bad, but is that an ideal activity for 8-year-olds?
It was like a mid-'80s idea.
Yeah, like homemade lawn charts or something. Yeah. It's like, well, hold on.
No, the kinds of things, God, that we did. So, in fact, it was a substitute teacher. The teacher who was supposed to be there that day, I don't know what, he had a stomach bug or something. And so there's a substitute teacher who had done this before. It wasn't part of the regular curriculum. We were divided into tables of 4 kids at each, and we each had a pot in the middle of the table, and we were adding chemicals that we would get from, it's funny, I haven't really remembered it in this kind of detail in quite a long time, getting chemicals from a sort of like island at the front of the class where the teacher stood according to this recipe. I remember it was called a recipe that was written on the chalkboard. And I just sort of zoned out for a while. I found it kind of boring. We had to take turns, getting the chemicals and mixing them. So when it's not your turn, like what could be more boring? I remember I went to the bathroom and I just kind of stood there. I didn't pee. I just hung out in the bathroom for a little while. And I came back and I got a drink of water. And I mean, this may sound like an invented memory, but I really remember the drain of the water fountain really vividly.
Mm-hmm.
I remember looking at it, the holes in it, little circular holes, watching the water go down. Went back into the classroom, and I remember looking at the board at this recipe, and then there was just this incredible event. Like in retrospect, I know it was an explosion, but at the time, I didn't really. If you had told me the ceiling fell on you, I would also believe that.
Can you back up for 1 second?
Yeah.
So were you, what you just described about going to the bathroom and stuff, it sounds like you were stoned, basically. Like, were you already kind of,
Well, no, I definitely wasn't. I mean, I was...
No, I know.
Yeah.
You were 8.
Yeah.
I'm saying, was there some
But
kind
was
of
there?
toxin in the air?
Oh,
that
no,
you,
no.
Oh, okay.
No.
So when
No,
you went to
that's-
go pee and you just didn't pee, it's not because you were like,
It's because that's what I was like.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
all right.
I also sort of
Did you
wondered
kind of
that.
think,
Yeah,
because
yeah,
when you were
yeah.
describing it, I was like, oh, that's me walking around a house stoned.
No.
Why did I? I thought I had
If
to
it
pee.
happened
some
Did I
yesterday,
order
that would be what this
Yeah, okay.
Huge explosion. It was at the table that I had been working at. So the 3 kids who were at the table were the 3 kids who were really badly injured. I sort of somehow got out of the room. I don't really remember how. I don't remember a door or anything. I just somehow got out of the room. There's like tons of smoke. Another class of kids started to file out, which my brother was in. I remember I waved to my brother and we sort of said, "Are you okay?" "Yeah, I'm okay." And then it was just a kind of chaos. And it's chaos in the real world and a chaos in my mind as well. And it's hard to differentiate
Sure.
those 2 chaoses. I saw my best friend on the ground and he was really, really like nearly fatally burned.
Oh my
And,
gosh.
Yeah. And we had this exchange where I spoke to him for a little bit. He was sitting there slumped. I looked at him. I asked him, "What do I look like?" And he was like, "What do you mean?" And I said, "Because, your skin is like not on your face. And is my skin on my face?"
Oof.
And, this is one of those moments that you spend your life wishing you could take back. Like,
Yeah.
I wish you could be the comforting friend
Yes,
who
yes,
says,
Well, you're in the middle of trauma,
yeah. And I was 8.
Yeah.
and you're 8. Yeah.
But you do beat yourself up regardless of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. Like,
No.
reason doesn't
You
really
can't
matter.
think yourself out of it. Yeah.
Yeah. So we had that exchange, and then some adult at some point picked me up, wrapped me up in a blanket, and carried me downstairs. And a lot of other crazy things happened that day. You ever been hypnotized?
No.
I went to a hypnotist a couple years ago because I thought I might try to write about this event,
Yeah.
and was just curious what would happen. It was a hypnotherapist, like not a guy who's at frat parties, but a guy who charges like $500 an hour
Sure,
with
sure.
a 4-hour minimum session. And it was really profound how he walked me through this event. And one of the things that he said about hypnosis is it's not like it gives you access to something that was concealed from you in your mind or repressed. What happens often when we tell stories is there's a part we can't get past, either because we can't remember a detail or it's painful. And so we just stop there as if it's a permanent impasse. And hypnosis can help you get around or get over that impasse, and you can find the rest of the story. I didn't really know what he was talking about until we went through this event.
Yeah.
And I got up to the point that I just told you about this exchange I had with my friend. And I was like, and that's pretty much it.
Right.
And he said, well, what color shirt was your friend wearing? I was like, who cares? I don't know.
Right.
And he was like, just tell me. I said, I have no idea.
Yeah.
And he said, just tell me, even if you're wrong. I said, I don't know, gray. And he said, and then what happened? It's like, oh, and then I started to tell the rest of the story.
Weird.
Oh, he distracted you enough.
He
maybe
somehow
from
got me
that.
past this impasse.
Huh.
Yeah.
And what did you then remember?
Oh, I remembered when I was carried downstairs, a conversation that I had with the camp director.
who took me into his office and had hit the insurance company on the phone.
I was just going to say, was it
Oh,
about
I
you being
bet.
litigious?
Yeah. And then I was taken into the school office to call my parents. And the kid who was actually most badly injured was sprawled out on the sofa. And he was African American, which made burns look a lot worse, because like the pale flesh against the dark skin is just more graphic.
Yeah.
I mean, he was really screaming and totally out of control, just animalistic. And then I remember a fireman who tricked me into going to the hospital, who said that there was this girl who said I was her friend and she was afraid of going alone, and would I just go in the ambulance with
that's
her?
great.
Ha.
You appealed to your
Like,
chivalry.
Yeah. I think I didn't even care if I was being tricked at that point. Like I wanted an adult to tell me what to do. I wanted to be in the care of adults.
Yes. And not the substitute teacher.
Yeah, I mean, the substitute teacher,
Oh my God. I feel horrible for that person.
for who? The teacher?
Kind of. I mean, I do in
Teachers-
retrospect because
Because
can
we
you
all
imagine
kind of.
carrying that weight for the rest of your life?
Who hasn't found themselves in a situation in life where they're like, I guess I just got to wing this? And most of us
Right.
get really
And
lucky.
You don't wing it with gunpowder, though.
Well, in retrospect, you're right.
I would have just brought like some Reese's Pieces, cut them open,
Put a
and
movie on. Like
Yeah.
normal
No, you
substitute
dump
teachers do.
baking soda in a trash can and throw vinegar on it.
Yeah.
And you have a
Oh my
volcano
God.
explosion.
No, that's a fun summer right there.
So
I
she
guess
just got the equation wrong. Like, what?
Well, you made it a her.
You know what? I was going to just point that out too.
Yeah.
I think I even
that's
said he at
interesting.
one point.
Yeah.
It was a he. Yeah.
Oh, that's bad.
what do
I think
we
I
know?
hypnotized you right this second.
That was bad. That was bad.
What color was her shirt?
Pink, obviously. Oh no.
That's fascinating. Did you just hypnotize Monica?
She's
think
currently
so.
hypnotized.
I think so.
So what were
Yikes.
the extent of the other children's injuries? Like, were they in the hospital for a while?
Yeah, I was there for 2 nights, 3 nights.
What were your injuries?
Just like second-degree burns on my hands, on my...
No, like concussion or anything?
Nope.
Okay.
Nope.
But what's so funny is I always think about like how differently intention frames our opinions of things. Like if you were in Belfast and you were English and the exact same explosion happens to you, but you know that there was some intention of terrorism. Now that thing becomes something. But this one is like, it's benign, but the level of physical trauma is identical. It's just it's fascinating to me.
That's a really, really interesting point that I never thought about. And the benignness of it is actually one of the most terrorizing parts.
I bet because, and this is, we've talked about this on here before, Dan Carlin history. I don't know if you ever listened to that.
Hardcore history.
I fucking love that guy.
Yeah.
He's amazing. But one of the things that he articulated that I would have never really put together in my head is that the reason people love conspiracy theories is that it's just too scary to imagine there's a man, some bozo in Dallas who can affect the course of history by shooting Kennedy. That is too scary for us because that means there are 7 billion variables and we're all fucked. But if there's a grand scheme, a grand intelligent design of all this, somehow that's more comforting. And yes, yours is like, oh, great. So I guess now anywhere you're at any given time, shit could fucking blow up. I have to imagine it's a very unsettling worldview shifter for you.
Yeah, I think I have had struggled with like a feeling of safety in my life because of that.
And I would imagine you already inherited a nice dose of fearing your safety.
You're
And
absolutely
it's
right.
weirdly confirmed at that point. Even if you're, I guess at 8, I don't know that you're at that age yet to do it, but you're hearing grandma and dad and you're like, a part of you's got to be like, I get it. But that was Germany or that was Ukraine. That was 1940. What do you, no, guys, stop it. We live in, and then you go to school, that happens and you're like, they're fucking right. This is a dangerous place to be.
Yeah, I mean, life is in fact a dangerous place to be. It's a hard thing with kids, to be honest about, especially, in an age of like school shootings, in an age of climate change, to talk about what it means to be safe, that in a way that's both honest, but also, comforting. I remember when my older son was 2, 3, he started asking about death. And I asked my therapist, like, oof, God, what's the right move here? Like, yeah, you're dead and you're dead forever. And you don't feel anything. You don't dream and nobody comes to visit you after a day or two.
Yeah.
Or what? And he said, he has like the rest of his life to figure out what he thinks about it. But at this age, like just making him feel safe is the best thing that you can do, because you can really get screwed up if you start to have anxieties when
Yeah.
Not that you can get screwed up, but they can be hard to undo in your childhood anxieties. So he said, I decided, he said, why don't you just tell him there's heaven, and that goes against everything that I believe in the sense of what I believe happens after you die.
Yeah.
But there's a part of me that very strongly believes in offering comfort where their comfort can be had, especially to a kid. It's not the same as an adult. And we had this conversation where he was like, I'm so afraid of dying. I'm so afraid of dying. So I gritted my teeth and winced, and I was like, well, you'll go to heaven. And he was like, well, what's that like? And I said, well, it's really great, and it's really just super.
There's ice cream every day.
Ice cream every day.
Grandma and grandpa are there.
Do I have to do homework? No, you don't have to do homework. Anyway, it culminated with him saying, like, I want to die right now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, well.
What's funny is we had the exact same thing, right? I think our oldest daughter was then maybe 4. She said, are you guys going to die? And I said, yes, we're going to die, but not for a long time. She said, am I going to die? And I said, yes, you're going to die too, but in much longer, like 100 years from now. And she said, and then I'm going to die. And I said, yeah, but in a long time. She started crying. She got scared. I was looking at my wife and we were both like, oh God, I know the solution. Just say there's a heaven. You'll be out of this. And then I was like, oh, this is how it's perpetuated. And then we were like panicking and we were looking at each other to kind of like steal our resolve. And then by God, 90 seconds later, she was done crying, completely over it, went on with her day. That was pretty much it. And I was like, oh, wow. I was like, I bet 5 more seconds of crying. I would have been like, oh, but there's a heaven and you're going to meet my dad.
And she's a pastor at a megachurch 30 years later.
Again, I don't advise anyone. I have no opinion on what people should do. That was our experience where I was like, I was panicking for 90 seconds. And then it just, like every other fucking thing, it just passed and she went on her way. And that's that. Yeah. But grandma was visiting. And she was telling my now 4-year-old, she's talking about her mom dying. My 4-year-old was like, where'd she go? And my mother-in-law was like, heaven. And she goes, what's heaven? And she's like, heaven is where you go and you die and you're with your family. And I was like, yeah, but where is it? And she's like, it's above the clouds. And I'm just knowing how my kids are. I'm like, this is getting worse and worse and worse. Like, if you now put it somewhere physically in space, welcome to 25 more questions about why can't I see it, blah, blah, blah. It was kind of entertaining
looking at
to
a
just
map.
Observe.
And did it resolve with just getting bored of the
She got bored. Yeah. She totally just got bored.
But one thing that their school does, those kids, which I think probably is why she was able to get over it in 90 seconds, is like from age 2, the spider will be dead on the ground and they'll be like, oh, look, the spider's at the end of its life cycle. And so like they're kind of putting it in from day one. This is a normal thing that happens.
Yeah, they've had a few pets that have died. They had a chicken, and then they had a service for the chicken. They buried the chicken at the school. Like all this stuff. I was like, God, I wish I would have had just any of this as a kid.
Yeah.
I don't know. What's your experience now? And not forget about kids. Just I find these things harder and harder to think about. I wish, and there's nobody telling me stories,
Yeah.
Well, here's what I do. I go, it's going to be blackness. That's heartbreaking. But then I remind myself, I'll have no awareness that it's blackness. So what am I? I'm fearing an emotion that's never coming. I'm fearing a sense of loss that's never coming. I'm fearing the
aren't
abyss.
You fearing the absence of the emotion that's never coming?
The mental gymnastics I do, I go, I won't experience it. It's almost like telling me, last night while you were dead asleep, you got up and jumped the Grand Canyon on a motorcycle. Aren't you scared you did that? Well, I don't have any memory of that. So it's none of my business almost.
But that's okay because you woke up today.
Yes.
That's the...
By the way, I was at I won't say total, I was at 70% peace with this worldview I have until I had kids, because the thought of not being able to see my fucking daughters is insufferable. So in that way, I've definitely been like, boy, I hope I'm wrong, boy. I'd love to be wrong. Mm-hmm. I would love to come to and go, hey, in two blinks, your kids will be here with you.
I feel like that's actually a version of the alienation we were talking about before. Like I want so badly to believe, and I just can't.
Yeah.
I can't bring myself to the place.
And so have you drilled down into, because I've drilled down in like, why are you so skeptical? Why by nature are you this skeptical? And I have my reasonings from my childhood, but do you then try to track why you're even that way?
Well, because that skepticism is in keeping with everything else about me, except for my desire to believe.
Do you think there was anything in your childhood that made you distrust what you were being told?
Well, they weren't telling me about heaven. I mean, my parents don't believe any more than I believe. Mm-hmm. There's a Jewish philosopher named Franz Rosenzweig who was asked
if he was religious. And the answer he gave, which is my favorite answer to that question, is not yet. And an acknowledgement that that's not where I am right now, but then also an acknowledgement that if I could get there, that may be where I'd like to be.
Oh,
Yeah,
sure. I would
totally.
Yeah, if we could take one of the two pills, I certainly would. I would enjoy the comfort of thinking I'll see my kids for eternity.
Yeah, it may require a pill.
Yeah.
The pill may exist.
It doesn't end there. Your story with the explosion does not end there. You recover obviously from the burns and whatnot, but you then for 3 years have kind of a mental distress. Yeah.
Yeah, it was delayed actually. So the following year I was pretty much fine. Right, I seemed to be fine. I went to school. Everything seemed cool. It wasn't going to shrinks or anything like that. And then I guess it was 2 years later, I just started to have a very hard time. I was just nervous all the time, or that was the word I applied to it. Maybe it wasn't nervousness at all. But when I would try to describe to people what I was feeling, to my parents, I was very nervous.
Mm-hmm.
I was terrified of being called on in class, or that I would have to read aloud in class. That was like the worst thing I could possibly imagine. I often just wouldn't go to class for fear of being called on.
Mm-hmm.
Couldn't sleep over at anybody's house. I would pee in my pants, just like out of control. And it kept like crescendoing and becoming worse and worse and worse. And I remember thinking at one point, you either have to like stop doing this or you're going to have a very bad life. Something really bad's going to happen and you're going to make other people's lives really bad. And I just stopped. And again, it's like you pay a price for just stopping.
Yeah.
It's not great for the system. But, it looked okay. Like I was able to go to school again and all of the ways that the problems were expressing themselves just stopped. And I think I started to become a different person around then. Like when I was a kid, I was very flamboyant. Like I'd wear like bow ties and rings and it's just like...
You were like a magician.
Like a magician without tricks. And
Trickless magician.
A good title for something. And then I was like not a magician without tricks. Like I was more like the person who's sitting across from you now.
Yeah.
So like fairly conservatively dressed.
And this would have been around 11-ish?
Even like 11, 12. I remember my bar mitzvah when I was 13. This is like a scene from a sitcom. I went into the rabbi's office before I started crying because I was nervous. That feeling, nervousness, really came back. And I surmounted it because, I had to. Like, what are you going to do?
Call off the party.
Flowers go home, band go home, caterer go home, relatives from out of town go home. I just couldn't do it. And maybe that is actually what it was to have a bar mitzvah in some way, like to move into a kind of adulthood where it was more being a participant rather than being the star of my own show. But again, it's not uncomplicated.
Yeah. I can't relate at all to having had an experience like that, but it does make me think of being in like 10th grade, just hating how I looked and dressed in 9th and 10th grade. And then one day just waking up and going, you know what? We're not betting on your looks. You got a good personality and that's your fucking ticket out of this thing. And it's time to shift gears. And it was a very specific thought process and a decision. And I launched out on this new thing. And it is interesting that young people can make those kind of decisions. And
I think about that a lot now, actually watching like Greta Thunberg and watching kids that age. There was a Washington Post poll or survey a couple weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, that found that the majority of American teenagers are scared about climate change and angry about climate change. When I was a teenager, I was scared and angry too. And like I felt very much at the mercy of what the adult world was doing. We grew up in the Cold War, the movie The Day After. Yeah. Like you literally had in the back of your mind, nuclear holocaust is an option. Yeah. And short of that, just a Holocaust. A bargain basement Holocaust. Yeah. And I think I don't envy teenagers now. It's going to be really hard.
Yeah. And then coupled with far higher level of isolation, a far
Social
higher,
media.
there's so many things happening.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally, yeah.
Yeah.
But you go to Princeton. Okay, it was not your first pick. You'd much rather have been at Harvard. Monica and I are uniphiles. We're really obsessed
We coined
with
that
fancy,
term.
Yeah, fancy
Schools.
that we didn't go to. So we really dig it.
We think it's cool.
But I have to say, we haven't had anyone from Princeton. And when we read that you had gone to Princeton, I literally went, hey, what happened at Princeton? You used to say when I was growing up, it was like Princeton or Harvard, Princeton or Harvard. Now I don't feel like that's what people say. It's like, I don't know what it is, Stanford. And
I don't really know what people say either. And I went to visit it with my dad, and it was like the weather was nice. I had a good sandwich. I was in a great mood. I was like, I'll take it. This place looks great. This looks like a college for sure.
Yeah.
It was a totally uninformed decision. Totally uninformed. If I had done like the tiniest bit of research, probably I would have gone somewhere else. It was a fairly conservative campus. And it wasn't the most obvious fit.
Well, a big departure from your school where you called, your science teacher Ed and stuff. It's almost the opposite experience.
Yeah. But there were wonderful things about it because of that. They have amazing art department and creative writing department. And people aren't like clamoring to get into the classes. That's just not where like the interests of the student body lie or didn't back then.
Yeah, they're all future world leaders, basically, yeah.
Future world destroyers.
Yeah.
So I got to take, writing classes with like Joyce Carol Oates because I applied and it was really easy.
But you were a philosophy major, so that was that initially an elective basically to take?
So I didn't choose a major until the last possible moment, whenever that was. I want to say it was like junior year. And I remember I was sitting on a bench and I was like, God, I got to pick a major. What am I going to do? I could do English, I guess, but I don't really want to do that because maybe I'll be a writer and it just feels like putting sour cream on cream cheese, like too similar. Don't want it. I could be a psych major, but then then I was like, what would sound great is if I were a philosophy major. If I could spend the rest of my life telling people I was a philosophy major. Yeah. And that was pretty much how
isn't that's one of the most common transfers for law school, isn't it? Isn't philosophy up there?
A lot of lawyers are philosophy majors, yeah.
Did you have favorite authors at that age? Were you obsessed with anyone?
I really wasn't a big reader.
You weren't?
And oddly enough, I'm still not a big reader. I didn't come to writing through a love of literature. It was really more through a back door of like, first of all, I love having control of my time and not having a boss.
Yeah.
I like being able to explore being a writer is not at all different than what you're doing right now. Like you get to just explore things and think about things and talk, except that I'm talking to myself instead of to somebody else.
Well, I initially was trying to be a writer. I self-submitted 8,000, short stories, the whole thing. I was obsessed with several different writers. And I've only later come to realize that I just loved the control of it. I loved creating a world where everything I said went.
Yeah.
And I deeply desired that control.
And it's a way to close that distance that we were talking about. Like on the page, I'm myself.
Oh, yeah, totally.
Yeah.
You almost have to lie to yourself and say, like, no one's ever going to read this. Just write this thing and pretend no one's going to read it.
I just kind of dissociate. I don't even think about it. It's just when I'm writing, I'm just writing. And it's really the one place in life where there's no etiquette, there's no expectations. I don't have to please anybody. It's really unconstrained, and that makes it hard because then if it sucks, it's because you suck.
Also, limitless options creates fatigue almost, right?
Yeah.
That's why like creative boxes are sometimes so useful. It's like, I got to make it work right here.
There's this great Borges story about, I hope I'm getting this right, but two like kings, and they challenge each other to create a labyrinth that's more difficult to get out of. And so King A puts King B in this enormous labyrinth, like the size of a city with a million forking paths and dead ends and all of that. And it takes King B 3 years, of stumbling around and making wrong turns, but he finally gets out. And then King B puts King A in the middle of a desert and he says, get out of this. And, if there are no walls, there's no way to escape.
Yeah.
And oftentimes with writing, I feel like the freedom of it is itself a kind of like enslavement.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so you start working with Joyce Carol Oates, and she gives you some encouragement, right? She kind of likes what you're writing and really encourages you to pursue that. And you end up doing a thesis, and it's largely about your grandmother. Yeah, is that?
Yeah, I mean, my thesis was a draft of my first book, Everything Is Illuminated.
How much of Everything Is Illuminated is your grandmother's story or inspired by your grandmother's story? Like how much?
Virtually none of it, actually.
Is her actual story?
Yeah. So my grandfather had a wife and a baby, and he worked just outside of the village. And the Nazis came through while he was working outside the village and killed everybody. And when he was on his way home, he had no knowledge of that anything had happened. A friend of his stopped him just a couple kilometers outside of town and said, "You can't go back. This is what happened." And he said, "I'm going back. I don't care. They can kill me. I don't care what happens anymore. Just let me go." And his friend had to physically constrain him, like force him to survive. And he ended up being hidden by some Christian family. And, made his way, like survived a day at a time and ended up meeting my grandmother in a DP camp.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So there is a photograph of him with this family.
The Christian family.
Yes, this is a real thing.
Were they baptizing him in the photo?
they were feeding him white bread. So, and I guess it was the summer after my junior year of college. I was before the summer, it's the end of the school year. I was thinking about what I should do. Like, should I get a job? I was like, maybe I don't even know what led me to this thought, because it's not the kind of thought that I would have had at that time, except that I did have it. Maybe I'll just go, check out where my grandfather came from.
And this was the Ukraine?
Yep.
Okay. I shouldn't say the Ukraine, right? It's just Ukraine.
Trump will sort it out.
Okay. He'll leave me.
When we get the transcript, we'll know for sure.
Yeah.
I don't know what I was thinking. And sort of like the decision to go to Princeton, I was totally
And this
unprepared.
is 1999, yeah?
This is 98.
So it's probably pretty bleak there, yeah?
Well, where I was going was super bleak. I mean, it was just out of time. It was dirt roads,
Horse-drawn carts and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. And because I had done almost no preparation, I just found nothing. I was like an idiot. I got off the train. I was like, all right, let's, anybody know any of these people in this picture? Literally like that.
Yeah.
But because it was such a complete failure, and because I was beginning to think about writing, it kind of worked. Like, it stimulated my imagination rather than...
Well, you're probably terribly lonely there, right? Yeah?
Well, I wasn't there for that long.
Oh, you weren't?
No, I was only there for 3 days. And then I was in Prague.
Oh, yeah, that's a great place.
It really is a great place.
Yeah.
Probably a little less great as time passes, but...
Yeah. Also so cheap then.
Probably a little less cheap as time passes.
Yeah.
But I lived there for that summer, for about 2 months, and that's where I wrote the first draft of this book.
Oh, wow.
Sort of in response to the nothingness that I found in the Ukraine.
Yeah, you basically just had to make up your own story because you didn't get the one you were looking for.
Yeah.
Stay tuned for more Armchair Expert, if you dare.
You published it in 2002, so only a few years later, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
And then the book's a big success, and it gets made into a movie. At this point, do you suffer from imposter syndrome at all? Are you like, there's a mistake, I've fooled them, I'll be discovered?
It was a little too fast even to have those reactions. I was so inside of the experience. I just wasn't capable of reflecting on the experience.
Yes, or seeing maybe even the uniqueness of what was happening to you.
I mean, I knew the uniqueness because the same book, Every Word in the Same Place, I sent it out to agents, maybe, 15, 20 agents. It was rejected by all of them.
Mm-hmm.
I finally found an agent. She sent it out to every publisher in New York, and it was rejected by every publisher in New York. And then she fell ill and had to stop being an agent. So I was like, oh Christ, what am I going to do now? Do I continue to try with this book? Do I start a new book? Do I just go become a lawyer? Like, what am I going to do with my life? And I sent it to another agent who isn't my agent still.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, and it changed my life. Talk about like dropping something in a mailbox and your life changes. And then she ended up having a lot of success, commercial success with it, finding publishers who wanted to have an auction for this book that just a little bit before nobody even wanted to look at.
Isn't that crazy, the power of a salesman, really?
It is. I mean, the fact is everyone is working on a book, right?
Yeah.
And so editors, there are not that many editors in New York. They get
I don't know, 20 manuscripts a day, 50 manuscripts a day. It's just too much to read. But they depend on the curation of people that they trust. When someone says, I know you and you're going to like this, and they give it a read. Yeah. So I was the beneficiary of that. So I knew even while it was happening that there was something a little fishy about the experience, like a little...
Yeah, how could it have been rejected 80 times and now all of a sudden it's... Yeah.
Well, that's like Harry Potter, too. She has that same story where, like, Harry Potter was...
What's that?
Was rejected by all these publishers.
That's
and
a book?
stuff. Get out of here.
It's the Swedish girl who...
Get out of
She just sailed across the Atlantic?
Anyway,
That's
but
nuts.
that's crazy.
Yeah,
and, like, then you're the... Yeah.
The biggest bookseller of all time.
Yeah.
When it got pitched to you, like, hey, was it Liev Schreiber who originally was like, was he the first person to express interest in making that?
Yeah. So when I met with my agent, this one I was just telling you about, we met in her office. This was when she was just not beginning, but it was near the beginning of her career. And her office had used to be a closet. This little tiny room, maybe a fifth of the size of the room we're in right now.
That's tight.
Yeah. She said to me, what are your goals? Like, what would you love to happen with this book? I said, I really want $12,000. And she was like, that's the weirdest answer I've ever heard. Why do you want $12,000? I said, because then I think I could go to Spain and like live there for 6 months. And that's just what I want to do. And she said, I bet you we can get you $12,000. She got me $12,000. And I went to Spain. And this was in the period before the book was published, after it had been sold. But there's like, the publishing industry is pretty slow. It takes a long time between finishing a book and it being out in the world. Sometimes it's 6 months, sometimes it's a year, sometimes it's 2 years. So I was in Spain, and during that period, an excerpt of the book was in the New Yorker. And I got a phone call from someone at the New Yorker who said, this guy, Liev Schreiber, read your piece and wants to be in touch with you. Is that cool? And I actually didn't know who he was at the time.
You had never watched HBO Sports?
I think I had, but you don't see his face or hear his name. You just hear that voice.
Yeah, it's so great.
It's so very
great. It's the best.
Yes.
Yeah. The Bucks are coming down the field with their blood. Yeah. Oh, God. Sign me up.
The Warriors of Sunday. I said, sure. And we ended up talking briefly. And when I was back in New York, I went to, I think, his 40th birthday. Is it possible? Maybe it was even 35th. I don't know. In any case, we met. And he just had this vision, which I found super compelling. And
he had his own personal story, right? His family was in that part of the world during that time. Yeah.
Yep. It was just a confluence of a lot of things. His story, my story, where he was in his career and a desire to direct, his sense of humor, my sense of humor. He and I, we're really good friends. We've been friends for years. And we're a funny pair. Like, if you were to see us standing next to each other, you wouldn't necessarily, like an alien wouldn't recognize us both as humans.
Well, he is, I've had dinner with him once. Monica, he is one of the most masculine men I've ever met, in the most conventional definitions of masculinity, right? I mean, there's a heaviness to him where you're like, okay, if shit goes sideways with him, like you got your hands full here. This guy is a beast.
Yeah, no, he's the guy who like rushes the cockpit during a hijacking.
Yes.
But he's also a very, very sensitive, thoughtful, super smart guy. And we've had this great friendship for years now.
You didn't write the screenplay, did you?
No, he wrote it.
He wrote it.
Oh.
He wrote it. He directed it. It was his baby.
And how easy was it for you to turn over something to someone else and let it go through their filter?
I found it at the time simple for a couple of reasons. One, like I was much better then than I am now at full dissociation. Just like, it isn't happening. It's happening over there, so it's just not happening.
Yeah.
And I was psyched that like somebody would pay me.
Another $12,000.
And I was psyched that it was going to bring a lot of readers to the book because, the film industry, TV and film, it's like not like literature. They're on a totally different scale. So when a film or TV show it makes an adaptation of a novel, the novel is going to get 10 times, 100 times, 1,000 times as many readers as it had.
Oh, wow.
Before.
Oh, interesting.
And I was just psyched to see what he would do because he's a smart guy. And he has a perspective and charisma, and he cared about it.
And when you saw it, did you go like, oh, he got it right? Or, oh, this is a different thing, but I do enjoy it?
Well, there was no getting it right. I got it right. And I don't mean that in the sense of quality. I mean that like I made the thing I wanted to make, which has nothing in the world to do with whether it's good or bad, or
100%.
it just was what I wanted to, in the same way that like you get your own breaths right,
Mm-hmm.
And he made something really different. I mean, he actually removed fully half of the book. The book has these 2 braided stories, and he just took one of them. And so, yeah, I looked at it and it was like strange to see somebody else's choices.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of layers of removal. Like I was kind of writing a book about something that may or may not have happened. And I fictionalized it to some extent through like the filter of my own imagination and concerns. And then he kind of made an adaptation of this history that may or may not have happened. And it was filtered through his concerns. And then like Elijah Wood kind of played me, like a character has my name. And
it goes through his filter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was an experience that was funny. Not like haha funny, but funny like this tickles me a little bit funny.
As a surreal kind of thing, right?
Yeah. And a lot of these decisions that, when I write like in bed. Or in like a chair in my kitchen. And I make decisions that feel very, very personal and intimate and totally insignificant when I make them. But then sometimes they resonate. It's a weird experience to share these like artifacts of my very inner life. I'll, go to do a reading and someone will come up and say, what meant so much to me and really changed my life is that moment in the book when, and they'll say something I don't even remember.
Right.
I literally don't remember writing it. And then the things that I agonize over and care about and that actually move me oftentimes are never mentioned by anybody.
Yeah.
So it's both like exciting and it's also a kind of price that's paid for like exposing oneself in that way.
Yeah. So after the success of that, you do Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close, which is about a little boy who's dealing with the loss of his father. He died in 9/11 and he finds a key of some kind. Is that what it is?
Yeah, it is. Although the funny thing is, if you push me too hard, I literally won't remember.
Sure. You're like the Ozzy Osbourne singing the Black Sabbath songs.
Sort
you
of
need to tell
exactly like that. Yeah. Just no Sharon.
But I wonder if just knowing obviously your father did not die, but I was curious, like, do you think in any way you were, and this sounds so armchairy psychologist, but does it have anything to do with the 8-year-old who got an explosion in front of him?
So at the time I would have said no.
Uh-huh.
That my first book was called Everything Is Illuminated, which would have been a pretty good title for a book about the explosion. My second book...
It was very literal, yeah.
My second book was called Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close, which would be maybe even a better title for a book about the explosion.
Yeah.
And I just was not thinking about it at the time.
Yeah.
I often have plans for what I'm going to write and things that seem like good ideas.
Yeah.
I've never once had a good idea that turned out to be a good idea.
Right.
I've written, I think, 3 or 4 sold proposals to publishers, and I've never turned in the book that I proposed. It's always just gotten sidetracked. I realized the thing that in my head was clever in life wasn't. And the world changes, and the things that interest you in 2005 are not necessarily the things that interest you in 2007. I've also become, the older I've gotten, less reliant on or confident about my abilities. Like I know what I'm capable of, and it doesn't thrill me. Like it's not that exciting to me. But what is exciting to me are the like accidents, the things you stumble upon, the weird coincidences. One of my favorite lines about writing is by the Russian poet Joseph Brodsky, who said the rhyme is smarter than the poet. People write in verse because it's pretty. It sounds great. But also when you have to end a line with a word that rhymes with the one at the end of the line above, it's like a problem.
Well, it's the box. You've put yourself in the creative
exactly
box.
Right.
Yeah. It's funny you say that about the titles of your book because you're right. They're like literal descriptions of what you went through, which is interesting. And I'm on a show with my co-stars, this actress Lake Bell, and she's directed 2 movies, both of which have ellipses in the titles, which is a very, very weird thing to have in a title of a film. And then her acting is very ellipses. There's a lot of like, she thinks on her feet, and she takes the second to, And I pointed that out to her, and she was like, oh my God, you're right. And it's so funny how many things you can see on the outside that like in the forest you just can't see.
So I don't know if it's because we're looking or because it's true. The other thing is it may be that like she does what she does
subconsciously or keep stumbling into these elliptical situations.
Yeah.
It may also be that you're the kind of person who observes that kind of thing. Like the observation says something about you, just as the action.
Well, I'm almost just explicating something. I'm deciding what I think a pattern is in a weird way as well.
Yeah.
Well, I would imagine, too, that you would have been very likely to develop kind of second album syndrome after Everything Is Illuminated, because it's exceeding your wildest dreams, and then I imagine it's a little daunting to follow that up.
I think I had that after my second book.
Okay.
I was it happened quickly. I wrote my second book quickly.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have the perspective yet to have that fear or anxiety, but I did after Everything's Illuminated. And in fact, I didn't write another novel for about 10 years. I wrote a nonfiction book. And at the time, I would have said, it's because I'm drawn to this other material. I want to explore this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
In retrospect, I'm sure I was also driven by fear.
Yeah. Well, get real. We don't do a single thing on planet Earth that's not somehow has its origin in fear. I don't believe.
It's in the
whether
mix.
you're masking it. Yeah. It's always in the mix. Yeah. You have in Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close, there's a, I guess I would describe it as almost a multimedia facet to it, which has been called a visual writing as a technique. That's new to me, that concept. So within that book, you've got like lots of pictures, and the book ends with maybe 15 picture illustrations or something. How do you decide what brought you to that? You know, people love it. Some people hate it. What's the...
Probably fear was a lot of it. Like, I wouldn't do it that way now.
Okay.
It's interesting I've written, let's say, like 6 books.
Mm-hmm.
It sort of depends what you call a book. But there are ones I like more than others.
Sure.
It's not as if they're all equal to me. I don't love that book.
Interesting.
And what's really weird is it's my most read book.
Yeah, it's very popular.
Yeah.
And it was made into a movie that Tom Hanks and Sandra Bullock star in. Was it nominated, I think, even?
It was, yeah.
Wow, yeah.
How ironic. I love it.
Yeah.
What is
about it? Yeah.
I feel like it was trying rather than just being itself. Like, I like things that are done for their own sake. I love people that just live in the way that they are, you know?
Yeah.
And in retrospect, it was really trying.
Well, again, you had to live up to the first book, so I could see where you're very perfectly positioned to try. Because when you were writing in Prague, no one's reading this fucking thing. You're not selling this thing. What do you care?
Right. Exactly. And now I knew that my second book would be published, and I knew that there'd be some amount of attention on it. So I should say at the time, none of this was conscious. I wasn't aware of any of what I'm saying now.
Right.
I just thought, this is a good way to tell this story. And like, this is a visual expression of this child's imagination. And why is literature so conservative anyway? Why aren't books more interesting looking? Yeah. And I actually believe those things, but I also believe that I was like influenced by my own anxiety.
So then you wrote Eating Animals. Now this is something that intrigues me because I don't know what happened to me. I am someone who loved reading growing up. And about, I guess, 15 years ago, I switched to nonfiction. I guess I blamed John Krakauer. I switched to nonfiction. I cannot fucking go back. I've tried to take someone like the class, everyone, unanimous, everyone loves them. I'm reading Lolita, and I'm like, I'm kind of getting into it. I'm like, wait, this whole thing was imagined by some guy, Right. So nonfiction for me, I don't know why now, is all I can read. So, and this interests me because there are things that we know ethically what to do, and yet for me personally, I go, and tough shit. Like, guess what? I'm not going to bat 1,000 in this lifetime. I'm picking the things I'm deciding to be ethical about. This isn't one of them. I would never try to mount an argument that what I'm doing is ethical. But eating animals, intellectually, I could probably sit here and argue with you as an anthropology major that we are fucking omnivores, whether you like it or not, and that we've been eating meat. So I don't know, blah, 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 blah. I used to tassel corn. I looked at the fucking chickens and pigs and I was like, ooh, this is gnarly. I roofed a slaughterhouse in Detroit. Ooh, this is fucking gnarly. I read Fast Food Nation. I'm like, this is rough. And then I went to McDonald's.
Yeah.
But yours was motivated, right? Because you had a 2-year-old son. Or maybe
my son wasn't even born yet.
Oh, okay. He wasn't born.
It was motivated because I'd had a discomfort about it since I was a kid. And I think most kids have some discomfort about eating meat.
Yeah, I have one right now that has elected to be vegetarian. I mean, mom's been vegetarian for 30 years, but
Eating meat this has nothing to do with the rightness or wrongness of it.
Yeah.
It is really different than the other stories we tell about animals, right? Like, you have pets, you treat them well. You read a bedtime story, the animals are heroes.
We'll go places just to look at fucking cows.
You have stuffed animals, and we love animals, except we also like
eat the shit out of them.
Yeah, eat the shit out of them. So it was born out of a discomfort that I'd had since I was a kid that I just couldn't really let go of. I mean, I was good at letting go of it sometimes. I ate meat for various stretches of my life, but I never lost that feeling that, like, I don't know if I want to do this.
Right.
And that doing this may require, like, willfully forgetting who I am, which doesn't feel like the best policy. So I just researched, like, what's the actual story in America? Where does this food come from? How
like
is it raised?
supply chain and everything.
Yeah. But just to return to something you said, which to me is like the basis of the way I think about this, the way I think about climate change. Like you said, I can't always bat 1,000, you know? I think when we recognize that something's important and that we care about it, not that other people care about it, that we care about it, we kind of go to these extremes of like, I'm going to bat 1,000 or I'm going to bat 0. I'm going to be a vegetarian or I'm just going to eat the shit out of animals.
Yeah.
And there are other options. Like, it's possible to recognize that we don't want to endorse a certain kind of behavior. We don't want to partake. We don't want to support it with our money or just even with our personhood, and to still do it sometimes. Like, that doesn't make us radical hypocrites.
Right.
We've gotten into this habit of like measuring our distance from perfection, which no one's going to attain anyway, rather than just measuring our distance from doing nothing at all.
Well, yeah, a good
smart.
friend of mine who's much smarter than me said, you know, you could eat meat once a week. That would be a huge improvement. And if everyone just said, okay, don't panic. We're not saying don't ever eat meat, but just if everyone went down to 1 or 2 days a week, you can't imagine the impact of that.
If everyone just went down to dinner, it would make an enormous, enormous difference.
Yeah.
It would get us so far toward where we need to be in terms of climate change. We were talking about tens of billions of animals, if you care, you know.
Yeah.
Better for our health, better for farmers, better. It's there is really not any argument for eating more meat.
Yeah.
There are an awful lot of arguments for eating less, but it's good to think about it, I think, as eating less. You know, Beyond Burgers. 90% of the people who buy Beyond Burgers also bought meat in the supermarket in that same period of time. And I think it's reflective of this change in the culture where it's not about like you're a vegetarian or you're not.
Well, that's the thing I've always hated is it's a very bizarre thing to make a pillar of your identity. I've just always kind of rejected that. You know, I'm a vegetarian. I'm a meat eater. It's just a weird identity source.
Well, I mean, I get that people either feel proud of it. By the way, it's not my strategy. Like, I don't introduce myself that way. I don't think about it that way. But I get it, why some people do.
But I'm saying, forget the ethics of the situation. Defining yourself by what you consume, to me, is almost a reverse of what your identity should be. It's like your identity is your output.
You know, you've referred to yourself as an addict a bunch of times. Right?
That's what I consume.
And it's what you don't and what you choose not to consume.
Yeah,
Yes,
And
but
it's like you feel it. I assume there's like a strength that you derive from like stating it, articulating. Like, this is important to me. This is maybe it's a struggle.
I say it so you won't offer me as Xanax when you leave. No.
More
No,
from
it's a huge part of your identity.
No, it totally is. It totally is. That emanates from me, and those substances are the symptom of what an addict is. So it's not really the cocaine. It's this obsessive compulsive desire to regulate my internal emotions with external things. So that's what an addict is to me. It's not all the substances are irrelevant. It could be sex, could be gambling, could be blank. It's this compulsion.
Not to like stretch an analogy, but do you think food is at all like that? Like that people consume food as a way of
Regulating?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
I do.
yeah,
I
for
do.
sure.
I do. Yeah.
Obviously, it's not physically addictive, which makes it a world of difference.
Well,
But it is
sugar's
It's emotionally addictive.
little physically. I mean,
Yeah.
you definitely feel a craving after you introduce it.
I mean, so I've been an on and off vegetarian for most of my life. I find it very, very, very hard not to eat meat. I would bet that if you became a vegetarian tomorrow, you would find it easier than I find it, despite the fact that I've written a book and, you know.
Interesting.
Well, I believe you because my wife's not an addict at all. And when we both went vegan for a year, it was 1,000 times harder for her.
Yeah.
Because I'm just used to going like, oh yeah, I can't have the thing I want really bad.
Right. I'm not used to that.
right.
And I have so many, First of all, I really like the smell and taste of meat.
Yeah.
And I have a lot of positive associations. Like my grandma, who we talked about, like the primary vehicle of her love was chicken, that she would make. And so if I see chicken, of course, I'm looking at a food that smells and tastes good, but there's also something in me that's like spinning, remembering that. Or my dad grilling burgers in the backyard.
Yeah, it means something. Yeah, there's a lot of associations.
And those are powerful and those are valuable and they shouldn't be dismissed. So I kind of get it when someone's like, this is who I am. I believe in these things and I'm going to talk about the fact that I've oriented my life away from them.
Yeah.
That said, like the aesthetic of vegetarians and vegans is often like not exactly for me.
Yeah.
And I think it's not exactly for most people. I did a reading in Toronto last night. Yeah, right in the middle of it, someone got on stage and had a poster that said, isn't, never right to eat animals. Animals are to be respected and cared for. And everybody starts booing, and the security guards come and try to get her off stage, but she's like a handful. And what I said was, it's a shame because I bet everybody in this audience pretty much agrees with pretty much everything she was saying.
Yes.
But she was saying it in a way that's really hard to hear and like makes us feel demeaned.
Well, there's a righteousness to it. And then my knee-jerk self-defensive thoughts are, okay, let's get into it, motherfucker. Let's go through your whole life. Let me evaluate your morality.
Yeah.
Okay, you're probably spotless on this topic, but let's go through all of it. Like, you want to have a morality off? I get enraged. It feels judgmental and holier than thou and righteous.
Yeah, I often feel that too. And I don't like it when people make me feel that way.
Yeah.
And my reflex is to attack.
Yeah.
Because I feel attacked. And it's a shame because we actually think the same things.
Yeah, and they just care about animals. I recognize that.
They care about animals in the same way that you do. They don't care about them more than you do. I bet. I mean, I don't eat meat. I doubt that I care about animals more than you do. I bet you like animals more than I do. I just, for me, it's not a philosophical thing either. It's not about like, is it right or wrong to eat animals? The truth is, I don't even know if I have an opinion on that question.
Yeah.
But I know what the situation is in America. I know that 99.9% of the animals we eat come from factory farms. I know that if you went to a factory farm, if I went to a factory farm, if anybody listening, I mean, every single listener of this, if they went to a factory farm, maybe they'd still eat meat afterwards, but they would definitely say, ooh, I don't like this.
Oh,
this is not good.
It's a horror show.
Yeah, and so if we can do less of it, we should do less of it.
Great. So I totally subscribe to that. Do you think it's possible to ethically have a meat industry and also produce enough meat for the level of consumption that exists? Is that even attainable?
I have been to farms that are really good, where I can imagine, like if I were a cow, if I can imagine myself into that position, I think, okay, here's the deal I'm getting. I get to spend my life like this, like in this setting, engaging in all of my like species specific behaviors, hanging out with my pals, like eating food that I like, living a reasonably long life. And then I am killed in a way that I don't anticipate and is as painless as we can manage.
Yeah.
I would probably take that deal as opposed to not being born.
Right.
The problem is 99.9% of the animals we eat don't get that deal.
Yeah.
And the real problem is what you said, which is there are too many people who want to eat too much.
Yeah.
And like the earth.
And it's only getting worse.
The amount of animal products that we consume now in the year 2019 is the same as if every person alive in the year 1700 ate 950 pounds of meat and drank 1,200 gallons of milk every day.
Oh my God.
So some of that is because our meat and dairy habits have like gone through the ceiling.
Yeah.
And part of it is because our population has gone through the ceiling.
Yeah.
But this is our reality. So like we could have a really interesting conversation about the ethics of meat eating in the abstract. And I could tell you, man, if we had farms, like certain farms I visited, yeah, that seems okay to me. But we just can't if we're eating this amount of food with this number of people.
Yeah, but if everyone went down to, as you said, dinner or 3 days a week or 2 days a week, whatever, then it starts to get manageable.
Yeah, we could start to dismantle like this factory system and move back to what we all imagine. Like when we imagine farmers, first of all, we imagine human beings, right? There are not human beings in American animal agriculture anymore. We had more farmers. I don't mean as relative to the population, not per capita, but as a real number. There were more farmers during the Civil War than there are today.
despite the population having increased 11-fold.
Yeah, it's become so mechanized. And,
Yeah, the whole point of factory farming is get rid of people and get rid of nature. And then you can like turn serious profit. So when we imagine farmers, we imagine humans. We imagine like grass, sunlight, people who care about their animals. People don't go into farming because they want to be cruel to animals. People don't go into farming because they want to destroy the planet. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Why would you do that? People go into farming because they like animals and like the planet, and they like the idea of providing, right?
I don't know if you'll like this given your history, but we have an area on I-5 if you're driving to San Francisco. It's one of the biggest cattle lots.
I know
You probably
exactly
went there.
what you're about to say. I've been there.
Yeah. And it is, man, the first time you see that, you're like, oh, I can't see the end of it. And I know that my eye can see 20 miles.
You can't smell the end of it either.
Oh, it's in
awful.
the and they have to water the tops of the cows because the birds will be on there just eating them alive. I mean, it is horrific.
But don't stop your car to look, because like if you do, some guy's going to pull up in a pickup truck and say,
keep it moving.
"What are you doing? Keep it moving."
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Like
No,
when
the secrecy of like animal agriculture in the United States is crazy. If you wanted to know about any food, this water that we're drinking, this whatever snack you've had, go get a bagel. You could say to the guy who bakes it, "Hey, like how do you do this? What's up?" I'll guarantee they'll say, "Come on back, I'll show you. You mix the flour, you do the water, da da da."
Yeah.
This is the exception. It's like the military, like the level of secrecy, and it got much, much worse after September 11th. To trespass now on a farm is considered an act of domestic terrorism.
Oh, really? Because what they proposed that someone would poison the food supply chain or something?
Yeah, and nobody will ever be a more efficient poisoner of our food supply system than our food supply system.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, 38 million people a year get sick from foodborne illness from animal agriculture almost exclusively. You know, we have animals that require antibiotics to live. You know, the turkeys that are sold in the United States, not some, not most, not 90%, 100% of the turkeys that are sold in supermarkets in the United States are the product of artificial insemination because they've been bred to grow so big that they can't have sex anymore. And like, this is our symbol of what's natural and a harvest and a bounty. And I always find it interesting when people start to wince when talking about like a veggie burger, you know?
Oh, yeah.
Like, it's just not natural. As like, but an animal that can't have sex and has to be.
I will say, just to circle back, I do think in general, the other big issue for me is I do think, and this goes for alternative energy, anything, you cannot rely on people's shaming and ethics to steer us out of this. Like, the market has to create options that are delicious, affordable, and all this stuff. And I do think things like Beyond Burger and Light Life and all these things, they really, they're solving the problem in a way. I just think appealing to people's like guilt and everything, I just don't see that as the way out of this stuff. Maybe I'm just cynical in nature, but
I don't think that appealing to guilt is the way out. I think appealing to people's own instincts is helpful. I mean, I agree with you that as things change in like the marketplace, it just gets easier to make good decisions.
Yeah.
I also think we're capable of making good decisions on our own, and like other social justice movements, you know, like look at what's happened with gay marriage in the last 10 years.
Yeah.
You know, those weren't the result of legislation. I mean, ultimately legislation followed the public will.
Yeah.
And it wasn't the result of any change in the marketplace. It's because things happen from the ground up.
Yeah.
You know, conversations in families, conversations that escalated to being in media and culture. So individuals can't do this stuff alone. And one of the problems is, like with climate change, if what it took to solve climate change was to stop like punching ourselves in the face, then we would have solved it already.
Yeah.
But we have to do less of things that are really good, you know, that we like, either that are pleasurable, like flying or eating meat, or that even feel like ethically good. Like it feels good to see other parts of the world and have your perspective expanded. I like the idea of taking my kids to other parts of the planet. And I like eating the kinds of foods my grandmother served me. But, you know, this is our situation and it's dawning on us.
Yeah.
And people like us don't want to think of ourselves as science deniers. We really don't want to think of ourselves as ignorant. So then we have a choice. Like we can act on what we know, or we can not act on what we know. Not because someone's shaming us. Maybe nobody's telling us to do it at all, but because we have like an awakening. You know, that this is, I want to be part of the solution. I want my kids to witness me being part of the solution, not because I'm self-righteous, but because I want them to have what I have. I love my life. Like, I love
being able to walk outside. I love being able to experience the seasons. I love coastal cities. I want people not only I'm related to, but like halfway around the world who I'll never meet to have these great things. I don't think that that's a kind of shame or a negative emotion. And I don't think it's something that has to be forced on us, but it does require like a collective shift, a new norm for how we think about these things and live.
Yeah. You have a new book, which is also not fiction.
We Are the Weather.
We Are the Weather.
Yeah.
And what it's about, it must be about the climate.
It's about the climate and food.
Oh, okay. So good. We were already kind of talking in the realm.
Accidentally. Perfectly.
Perfect segue.
Yeah. It's not an argument that I'm making, and it's not some conclusion that I reached and wanted to share. I was having a hard time over the last couple of years thinking about climate change and knowing what I know, which is no more than you know. I like read newspapers sometimes. I read magazines sometimes. I listen to podcasts. People forward me stuff. I'm a citizen, in the world. And knowing what I know about climate change and caring as I care, not because I'm an especially sensitive guy. I don't think of myself as an environmentalist. I'm just like a person in the world who likes living on this planet as it is and who has kids, which I think also influences my thinking. I started to feel a version of like this alienation that we were talking about before, where I knew that there was something I should be doing. Like I knew that I should be participating, and I just wasn't.
Yeah.
And even worse, like my carbon footprint is worse than that of most science deniers. The people that it's so fun to point at and say, if it weren't but for you ignorant schmucks, like we would have solved this problem already.
Yeah.
It's not true. In America, twice as many people believe in the existence of Bigfoot as deny the existence of climate change. The problem is not that half of our country is ignorant.
Yeah, right.
The problem is that we're not acting on what we know. Like we know that the planet is in deep shit because of human activity. And yet we have a hard time like changing our activities collectively or individually. Like I find it really hard. I just flew here from Toronto.
Right.
I'm flying back to Brooklyn tonight. That's bad. That's really bad for somebody who knows what he knows and cares as he cares.
Yeah.
So it's a struggle, but we have to engage with the struggle and not just like throw our hands up in the air and say, well, whatever.
Well, you kind of hinted at it earlier, and my wife's on a show called The Good Place, which kind of explored this in a very interesting way, which is they kind of had discovered that the good place is like heaven, basically, right? And they had discovered no one had been admitted in the last like 300 years or whatever it was. And it's because the world has become such a complicated web that any decision you make, if you really want to track what impact it has downstream, it's almost impossible to not have casualties just by being alive because everything is so complex and interwoven. And so I think what's daunting about it is what you brought up earlier, which is like, if we're constantly evaluating, are we perfect? We're going to be defeated immediately, as opposed to like focusing on incremental steps or the best next step, as opposed to, the stakes of it just feels overwhelming.
I completely agree. And it's helpful to like simplify things as much as possible, to acknowledge that we're going to cause harm pretty much whatever we do.
Yeah.
But not all harm is equal. Like the industrial, vegetable production is bad, but it's not nearly as bad as industrial animal agriculture. Flying on a plane is bad. It's not nearly as bad as flying on a private plane. Like there's a hierarchy of like how much destruction we're causing.
Yeah.
I just agree with you. It's overwhelming. And that feeling of being overwhelmed leads, I was going to say people, but I'll just say me because it is my experience, to these two different modes. One is we're fucked, and one is we're going to be fine.
Yeah.
And the truth is we're not fucked and we're not going to be fine. Like we're in the beginning of this process of really extreme loss, and loss that we care about. Like the loss of coastal cities, the loss of life expectancy, lives of children to climate, drought, food shortages, climate-related illnesses.
Fires in California here.
Fires in California, the burning of the Amazon, the melting of the ice sheets. Some of the loss has already been determined, but like the great majority of it hasn't. And it will be determined by what we do. And when I say we, it really is like people like me and you.
Yeah, I get easily defeatist about it, which is like, I think the damage is done. Now it's like, buckle up for the ride. I sometimes think that,
Well, it's definitely easier to think that.
Yeah.
There's something weirdly soothing about thinking that.
Yeah, like we blew it.
Yeah.
It's kind of like when I would choose to go out on a bender. I'm like, okay, we're fucked.
Yeah.
Let's see where we wake up in 5 days. There was something weirdly liberating about that.
So what changed you in that context?
I was so miserable, even in the desired state, that it just didn't work anymore. And I suppose you could apply that to this will become so miserable that we've got no choice but to act dramatically. It's like I went and visited my mom last summer before in Hood River, Oregon, which is so beautiful. Looks like the Hidden Valley Ranch label. Mm. And Washington was on fire. Mount Hood was on fire. And then there was also a fighter from Idaho. Idaho was on fire. It was all blowing into this valley. And I was like, oh, no joke. The world is on fire. Like you see it on the news, but to stand there and you couldn't breathe. And I was like, oh, and it's in all directions. Where would one even escape? Sprint to the ocean. At that point, you're going to act out of life or death, which is generally how also people get sober. It's like generally takes till it's life or death. And then, So we have a problem, which is by the time we reach that, it will be too late. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, in a way, in a funny way, Trump has kind of brought us to that place. Like, if Hillary had been president, I campaigned for Hillary. I voted for Hillary. I was very, very disappointed when she wasn't elected. Mm-hmm. If she'd been president, the U.S. would have remained in the Paris Climate Accords. Mm-hmm. And like every single country in the world, except for Morocco and the Gambia, we wouldn't have met the goals of the Paris Climate Accords. There's not a country in Europe. There's not a country in Asia. There's not a country in North America that's going to meet the goals of the Paris Climate Accords. But we would have felt kind of good and kind of complacent because our signature was going to be on the right line, on the right document. Trump, just through the force of his ignorance, I think is like awakening a wisdom in a lot of people. And the force of his apathy is awakening a kind of action. Mm-hmm. I don't think we would have seen millions of kids in the streets if Hillary had been president.
That is the crazy thing about viewing history on pulled out enough, where it's like, of course, now us liberals, somehow kind of think George W. Bush was great in some way, right? Like now I think he's kind of charming and cute.
I'd love to have a beer with him.
Yeah. But I was aware at the time, it's like, well, thank God he was so reviled at the end of his presidency because it really paved way for our first black president. And that might have been another 40 years out had it not been for him. So what a service he provided in some weird way. And my glass half full opinion of Trump is like, we might get our first female president out of this, or we might get a real substantial commitment to the climate, or we might,
Yeah.
So yeah, in the long term, I don't think we know yet what the result is of that.
Well, I find that like conversations about climate change tend to be about other people. It just always becomes about somebody who isn't present.
Yeah.
So I'm curious just about you. Like,
I'm the worst.
Well, when you were talking about this experience in Oregon, when there were all these fires and you had this moment of like, holy shit, this is for real.
Yeah.
Did it change you?
No. No.
And why do you think it didn't change you?
I have this totally flawed, erroneous assessment of the situation. This is what I tell myself. And this is all to relieve myself of the guilt because I love off-roading and motorcycles. I tell myself, hey, man, it's 1920 and prohibition's coming. It's coming. The party's over. So am I going to be the person that quits drinking 2 years before prohibition, or am I going to fucking be the last guy drinking? You know what I'm saying? Mm. I know that's so repugnant, I'm sure, to a lot of people to hear me say that. But it's truthful. I go like, oh, this ride's about to end. Everything's going to go electric. That's obvious. It's so clear. I want them to invest all the money that goes into the DOD into renewable technologies. I want that. I think Tesla's the answer, personally. I'm like, no one's making a sacrifice to drive a Tesla. It's a fucking awesome car, and it's a big win. Why wouldn't someone do it? That's the solution. That's all coming. These are the dog days of my fossil fuel life, and I'm going to enjoy it. Am I horrendous?
No, I've certainly never heard that before. I mean, you're hastening the end, right? Like the more you do of these things, one of the problems with climate change, unlike prohibition, is it's a ticking clock. Mm-hmm. And if we don't solve the problem, then we will never, by a certain time, then we will never be able to solve the problem because we enter into these positive feedback loops. Like,
they amplify each other. You start letting more methane out of the swamps.
Yeah.
And the higher
and then you just, whatever you do, there's no going back.
Yeah.
So there is like a responsibility to act now, or there's an imperative to act now. I also don't know who these leaders are who are going to make the changes that you're talking about
if they're not forced to.
Yeah.
And it's great to vote. Voting is the most important thing one can do as an environmentalist, but we don't get that many chances to vote. We only vote for a president every 4 years.
Yeah.
And political change happens very slowly. It's certainly like political change spreads more slowly than a fire.
Yeah.
And there are things that we can do now that will not only have real world consequences, but also push the culture. So somebody like you, right? Lots and lots and lots of people listen to this, to what you do.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to like shame anybody. You don't have to wag a finger. I actually really like your approach of just admitting to your own.
Well, by the way, I live with someone who's as carbon neutral as you can get. And another lie I tell myself is like, oh, you add us up, we're doing pretty amazing as a couple. Like she might even be, somehow absorbing carbon. So that's a lie I tell myself. Another one, because I'm going to own them all right now.
Yeah.
I also think humans by nature are fatalistic. That's why religion works, is everyone thinks they're going to see the return of the Messiah in their lifetime that believes in that. There's a lot of arrogance. Everyone has thought they were going to witness the end of the world. It's a pattern that humans have. I don't know why we're prone to feeling guilt and shame and that we've ruined everything. I think everyone's decided this is going to be the worst thing ever. I am open. There's a 10% chance in my mind that, then everyone moves north. Guess what? The vast majority of the untainted, unspoiled, unsaturated with mercury and lead poisoning land on planet Earth is all Russia, Canada, the northern latitudes. Utopia might be we were forced to move there. It got warmer. It was sustainable there. We did it the right way this time. We may look back and go, oh, thank God all that happens. I know that sounds crazy, but there's 10% of my brain that goes, yeah, this is the same thing, and everyone's going to think it's so terrible, and we're going to look back on somehow this, Again, I would not bet on that.
I would try to lobotomize that 10%.
Okay.
Because it may be that for people like us, we will have the ability
to move to Canada.
The great majority of humankind will not have that ability, doesn't have the ability now. We're already seeing it.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, climate change is a problem where the people who are most responsible for it are going to be the last to really feel it.
Yeah.
And there's millions and millions of people suffering right now because of our reluctance to make small changes. No one is asking anybody to like flip a switch and become a different kind of person. You said that you live to off-road and ride
motorcycles.
You don't have to stop doing that. Do that. If that's the thing that you're crazy about and you love, do that. You're not destroying the planet. But how often do you do it? A couple times a week?
Oh God, no. Maybe 6 times a year.
So do that. And like, could you make changes in other places? Like, food, I'm not saying become a vegan tomorrow.
Right.
Like that's hard. And to ask that of yourself is almost setting yourself up for failure. Can you just eat it at dinner?
Yeah. Like I'm open to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that we have this conversation in the wrong way that makes it feel
like I'm going to have to give up everything I like being on planet Earth for.
Yeah. And you're really not. And also like you want your kids to be able to enjoy the things that you enjoy. Right. And we can do that just with moderation.
Yeah, I'm like the gun guy who's like, you're coming for my guns because you want to get rid of assault rifles.
Well, unfortunately, that's the way everybody is now with the climate. Like even like Elizabeth Warren had this like news clip that went around where she was like, corporations want you thinking about your light bulbs, want you thinking about your car choices. I mean, as if there's anybody who doesn't give some thought to those things. But, well, I'm here to tell you, no one's going to take away your car. No one's going to take away your cheeseburger. And I was like, she sounds like fucking Charlton Heston talking about a gun.
Yeah, sure.
And it's okay to admit that like we've gone over the top with consumption.
Yeah, we're in the dog days of Rome or something.
Yeah, like it's okay to say, like we don't need to reinvent life in some radical way. We kind of just need to uninvent it, to live a little bit more like our parents or grandparents lived. You don't need to never have meat again, but we also need to stop having like a massive brick of meat at the center of every single plate that we ever put in front of us.
Yeah.
We don't need to stop flying, but we do need to like change how we fly. I had this really, really moving experience that happened about 2 weeks ago. I was in Brussels. I was giving a reading from this book. And at the end, there was a signing and a couple came up to me. They opened to the page where I normally sign, the title page, and it was filled with their handwriting. And it's like, what's this? And they said, well, we're getting married in a couple months. And we decided tonight that we need to have some kind of plan, because if we don't have a plan, we're just going to like keep doing what we've always done, because that's what people do. Like you do today what you did yesterday, more or less. And their plan was eat vegetarian unless served meat at a friend's house. eat vegan 2 days a week, have no more than 2 kids, and drive no more than 1,500 kilometers a year. This is in Europe. And then instead of just having me sign it, they'd written a line that said witness. And they wanted me to sign
Oh, that's cool.
And I found it really charming, and it was fun to get an insight into who they are.
It feels very European too in some way.
European.
Yeah.
And then I realized, holy shit, like I was the guy on the stage. I'm the guy signing the book, and I don't have a plan. And I went home to my hotel that night. I took a piece of hotel stationery and wrote out a plan because I realized I'm that schmuck who says, yeah, I'm going to try to fly less, which means nothing. Like if you say that, you just live like you live before. Like, I'm going to try to drive less. It means nothing. Nothing. It's empty. And worse than empty, it's like pure narcissism. You know, it's just virtue signaling. Like, look at me, I'm the good guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my plan was to not eat animal products for breakfast and lunch. And at dinner, I'm a vegetarian. I'm not going to fly for vacations in 2020. Like, I have to fly for work, or I feel like I do. And there are times like this where it feels really worth it to fly because you can expand the conversation about these issues. But I don't need to fly for vacation. I live in New York. I can take my kids on a train to like a million awesome places where we will have no less fun, and maybe even like sharing the story of why we're taking the train could add something.
Yeah.
I'm not going to take more than 3 cab rides a week. And I'm going to give a day of the week to volunteering for 350.org, which is an environmental organization that I really believe in, and working in the New York City public school system to talk to kids about like what's going on and what's the reality and what is your own power, you know, inside of this situation that can feel so alienating and distant and depressing.
350.org.
Yeah. My only point is you don't have to be dishonest about what your limits are. Like, you say, I love biking and I love off-roading. So that's like on the other side of your limit. Just like keep that away.
Yeah, it's almost like people who go to SLA, right? They have to define sobriety because you can't not have sex, right?
Yeah.
Or if you're in a relationship or you get married. So there's circles, right? And you draw these circles and you decide, for some guys, it's no hand jobs at massage parlors anymore.
Yeah.
And that's the final circle. And then their sobriety is, if they don't do that, then they're sober. And then it's a very similar approach.
That's a really powerful, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I like that.
But yeah, you can define what your circle is and what you're going to stay inside of.
Yeah, giving it words and like numbers.
I'm rarely encouraged, and this is having an effect on me.
Good.
This is the thing, like we're all on the same team and not everyone can contribute in the same ways, you know, like.
Well, I can admit I'm in the best possible scenario to do it better because I have resources and most people don't. I'm not scrambling to just keep my head just barely above water in a way that so many Americans are. I get it. Like, I'm sorry. Yeah, that's important, but fuck, man, I can barely get these kids to and from and then pay for everything.
Well, I'm really glad that you brought that up because I think there's a misunderstanding about a lot of these things being elitist when they're really not. So Harvard Medical School did a study in 2018 and found that it's $750 a year cheaper to eat as a vegetarian than as a meat eater, as to eat a healthy vegetarian diet as opposed to a healthy meat-based diet. And it's $250 a year cheaper to eat a healthy vegetarian diet than an unhealthy meat diet, like Burger King,
McDonald's. Yeah.
2.5 times as many people who make less than $30,000 a year describe themselves as vegetarian than people who make more than $75,000 a year.
Oh, really?
And people of color are disproportionately vegetarian. So you often hear people say like, yeah, but it's a privileged like white guys thing to talk about eating less meat. But it's actually privileged white guys who level that complaint most often. It's just not in keeping with reality. There are 2 really important caveats. One is there are people in the country who just don't have access to fresh food.
Yeah.
Right.
Like live in urban food deserts. And that's a huge problem that we need to solve. It's wrong. There should not be anybody who doesn't have access to fresh, good food. But we shouldn't just point at them as a justification for our not changing, which is often done. The other point I would make is even if it's cheaper, it's still harder for most people to like eat less meat because we're used to doing it in this way.
Well, it's so convenient. There's a drive-through on every corner.
Yeah, or you just go to the supermarket, buy like burger and put it in a pan and that's it. And you'll get full. And it's like a lie to pretend that it's easy to just like completely change the way that you think about food. I find it hard. And I have all the like privilege in the world and I have all the time in the world. And if I find it hard, then I know that other people are going to find it hard. So we just have to find ways of doing it incrementally and like applauding
each other's efforts and achievements rather than like,
Shame
you're the
spiraling.
asshole who tells me this but also does that.
Yeah. Now I really need a burger to regulate my feelings. If you shame me, now I'm going to sprint towards In-N-Out. Well, you're a goddamn pleasure. I'm really glad you made your way from Toronto here.
Really appreciate it.
We Are the Weather. We Are the Weather. And when does it come out? Is it already? It's already out because
Been
you're
out for
signing.
about 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
Yeah.
Okay, great. We Are the Weather.
Is it on audiobook?
Yeah. In fact, yours truly.
No
Oh,
way.
great.
You have a very soothing
Pipes.
voice. Oh, this is a
Nice.
done deal then
Yeah.
because I listen every night to an audiobook.
Yeah.
Okay, great. I'm going to Audible when I
Good.
get home tonight, and I'm going to get it, and I'm going to listen to it. So thank you so much for coming in. I wish you a ton of luck and talk to more idiots like me and slowly help us.
There's only one idiot like you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
And now my favorite part of the show, the fact check with my soulmate, Monica Padman. I'm enjoying a rare indulgence right now.
Tell me.
In the trailer. Still on our
Field trip.
I got you 3 cookies from catering.
You did.
I broke my fast and had some thinking, oh, I'll bite. Now I've had at least half of one of those cookies, maybe
they're
even a full one.
They're pretty tasty.
Yeah, that chocolate. Anytime the chocolate looks like it's already melted in there, even though it's not fresh out of the oven, that's very appealing to me.
Yeah, it has a nice mix of crispy and soft.
A lot of butter. The butter crisped up. Mm-mm-mm. I wonder how many people are pulling into Come and Go right now and buying some chocolate chip cookies.
Do you
'cause
think
we're
they have
triggered.
good cookies at Come and Go?
Oh, the best.
No.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. They have cookies and cream at Come and Go.
Ew.
Gross.
Gross.
I love my Come and Go t-shirt, by the way.
Yeah,
I think
sent
they
you.
thought like they were sending me like a joke.
Yeah.
Joke's on them and me. I think it's a really cool shirt.
It is a cool shirt, and it's pink.
It's pink, which I don't own many pink tops, if any. You almost need that pink pastel backdrop to put a word like cum, K-U-M on it, and for it to not be aggressive.
offensive. Yeah. They designed that nicely.
Like if the shirt was black and it said cum in gold,
In white. Oh, and gold.
you'd be like, ooh, too aggro for me.
Yeah,
Those are my colors. I just put it in my world.
sure.
Yeah. I really want you to declare some colors, by the way. I think it's added to my life.
All right.
Did either parent, like my poor dad, it was decided that he liked elephants.
Oh, I know. Yes. This.
In every birthday,
Yep.
Father's Day, Christmas, I just went to the mall and I tried to find a statue of an elephant. And I did. I bet I personally bought him 36 elephants. And his poor house was just, there was hundreds of
covered.
elephants. Everyone would get them.
I know.
Come in.
Sorry to interrupt.
You should be, Nick.
I am. I'm very sorry.
If anyone follows Instagram, then I posted a picture of the man on set who humiliates me physically.
Sure.
He's now in the trailer humiliating me in front of Monica and Rob. I've just
The
been
best way to do it.
I didn't mean to do that. I'm really sorry. This is Nick from season 2 of Bless His Mess. And
Now, do you know, Monica, that what Nick and I have elevated our friendship? We've got a work friendship,
Okay.
but we have a loose plan to work out in my basement.
Oh my god.
that I actually am really excited for.
Me too.
You'll
I'm
like
I
looking
think we
forward
can
to
make
it.
some real strides working out with each other.
Some real gains.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm nervous because you're clearly much stronger than me, but I'm going to put on a good show.
Obviously, we're going to be trying to impress each other, but
Yeah.
we can't get hurt.
It's gonna
No,
be a
no one
mess.
can get taken out. I mean, ideally, both of us have a hard time walking the next day, but not a full out.
Copy. Yeah. No.
Are they calling for me?
Yes,
They are.
Yes.
They'd like to see me on set.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, well,
So
we'll
I
put
just
a
want-
pin in this. But a great
come back.
stop by from Nick.
Yeah. Thanks for the stop.
No,
by.
thanks for having me. I didn't mean to stumble in like.
No, well, that should be your autobiography, stumbling into fun shit.
Right on. So as soon as you're ready, we'll see you over there.
But anyways, back to the elephants. When he died and I went back to his apartment to I don't even know, tell my brother what was in there, you
Yeah.
know? I did see all those elephants and I was like, it's kind of sad.
Did you take
to see a
any?
collection of someone who's no longer.
Yeah. But it's also sweet.
You know, in retrospect, I should have grabbed some more stuff. Luckily, my brother went back 2 weeks later and cleaned everything out. And he took stuff and then he ultimately sent me all of his coins, or maybe it was my dad's buddy sent me all of his sobriety coins.
Yeah.
The box that's holding those coins
Is an
elephant.
box. Oh, man.
So I guess I did get one of the elephants. And then also in the girls' room, the Babar picture in the girls' room was my dad's.
It was?
Uh-huh. Isn't that cute?
Oh, that is so sweet.
Yeah.
Wow, that poster's really held
holding
up.
Yeah.
And you know what? He probably only liked elephants so.
I totally.
Barely.
Especially the more that he accumulated.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Jonathan Safran Foer.
You have the easiest time saying Foer.
Foer.
I want to say Foyer or Foyer.
I think I was mispronouncing it for a long time. I was calling him Foer, but that's wrong.
Dennis Rodman Foyer.
That's what I was calling him. Yeah. I thought he had a lovely energy and was really nice and interesting and smart. Princeton, Unify.
Big time unifile.
Yeah.
He did this thing that Bill Cosby famously did on stage, which was he sat down, which is not what a comedian's supposed to do. You're supposed to take a position of authority and power and control the audience. But Bill Cosby had so much confidence, he just sat on a chair and told you a story. Yeah. And he was, in that time, the best comedian out there.
Yeah. Not that we're comparing what those two did in life. Only the one comparison.
Cosby is a vile piece of shit.
Sure.
Also a brilliant fucking comedian.
Yeah.
One of the best ever.
Yeah.
And uniquely positioned himself in a beta position while doing comedy, which is still worth recognizing.
Oh, yeah.
So,
I'm just making it clear.
Oh, yeah. I love this notion that you can't say, Cosby was a good comedian. Like, what?
I think you can.
Well, right. But I mean, you got to say, also, I think he's a piece of shit.
Well,
you can't just say, I think he's a good comedian. Now, I didn't say I think he's a good human.
Yeah.
If my statement is, I think he's a good human, we've got some problems. Yeah. But if I say he's a great comedian, I don't know. It doesn't need an asterisk, or does it?
I think it does.
Okay.
If there's horrific stuff attached.
Like saying Hitler's a great painter.
Yeah. I think you have to say, and also.
Now, again, I
some
don't
bad stuff.
think Hitler was a great painter, but he was certainly a better painter than I am. Have you ever seen any of his
I've
paintings?
never seen any, no.
I want to say in the book, The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich, they show some of his paintings in there. You know, he's in Vienna or whatever trying to be an artist.
And they're pretty good?
They're good. Yeah, they're much better than I could do.
Wow, what if he had just become a painter? I mean, wow.
Much better for the world. But you also think of all the things that have come out of World War II. It's just it just set the world in such a different direction.
I know.
United Nations and Israel being its own country and nuclear fission and all these weird things, vulcanization of synthetic rubber. The whole world's different without World War II.
Yeah.
So if he's only a painter, better, but also, who knows, we might be back 40 years.
Or we don't know. This is a sliding door situation.
Oh, textbook sliding door.
Also, maybe everyone still ends up in the exact same place, just through different equifinality.
Wow, we love equifinality. That's going to be our new word.
We're going to say it in every fact check.
I find that I have a desire to explain that concept often, and I don't have the word for it.
Well, now I do.
I always talk about Kristen and I took radically different routes to the same house with the same kids. That's equifinality.
Well, that's aquafinality.
That's aquafinality. You're right.
Don't get it
all
mixed up.
rivers lead back to the ocean. Aquafinality.
But Jonathan.
Yeah, Jonathan. Well, what I was going to say about him, the reason I brought up Cosby was he refused to modulate his energy to meet mine. Yeah. Which was awesome. Yeah. Because I had to kind of come down to his energy. And I loved existing at his energy. It was very thoughtful.
Yeah. But it was funny, though, because in the room, I felt that. Yeah, he's not getting riled up by this, or his focus is small, it seems, which... yeah, it was just cool to witness. But then when I was listening, I did not feel that at all.
Right. And we've had the opposite, where someone's very animated and physically energetic in person. And their voice, when we hear it back, it's like, oh, there's not the same energy level. Yeah. They're not commensurate.
It's fascinating.
But anyways, he was so darn good. And he really is one of the handful of guests where afterwards I was like, I might have to change who I am a little bit.
Yeah, make some changes.
Yeah, it was compelling.
Very. And because he's not He's not preaching.
No, he's not preachy. That's
At
how
all.
he gets through to you.
Yeah, he's not saying anyone has to go to any extreme. In fact, he's saying the opposite. He's saying you don't do that. That's actually, you're not going to yield any results.
Yeah, don't go vegan.
Yeah, if that's not anything in your realm of possibility, don't make that your goal. But yeah, one meal a day.
Yeah, for me, it would be the commitment to cut my meat consumption in half. Lunch, I generally have some chicken breasts and some kind of vegetable.
Right.
And then at dinner time, I generally again have a chicken breast and some kind of vegetable or a meat breast.
Or a human breast.
Oh, if things go well.
Are we allowed to eat human breasts?
Yes, if both parties are complicit. Do you think, whenever you think about the Alive situation, like the people who got in the plane crash in the Andes and had to eat one another, or the Dahmer's Pass, these these are historic episodes of cannibalism.
Oh.
Always curious, what's the first body part you eat?
Oh.
Because I'm wondering if titties would taste good. I mean, they certainly look good and they feel
you
good.
would try that one.
I feel like I would try those first, but do you think they would taste weirdest?
They're fat.
Yeah, yummy. Well, we love our
Steak
bone-in
fat.
ribeyes with the fat.
Marbled fat.
Oh, marbled.
But I'd probably eat like the thigh.
Go with the chicken approach.
You know why? Because prosciutto, I think, comes from
The thigh?
the thigh. I could be really wrong about that.
Yeah.
But I do
But the loin,
like prosciutto.
the loin, tenderloin on a cow is this inner your loins.
But I think if I had to like spread someone's legs and then eat around their loin, I probably would feel gross.
But you would take bites right out of the carcass. I would carve some off and put it over a fire.
Are we allowed to do that?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
You
We're
can
allowed to
prepare-
cook it?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
I think they had fire. Cheek. You know, people eat pig cheek.
Yeah.
I bet your cheeks taste delicious.
You think?
Yeah. You got kind
You
of
like
chubby
the fatty
cheeks.
areas.
I do, yeah. Well, I don't want anything tendony, ropey,
ugh.
rubber bandy tasting.
I'm going to stick with leg.
Okay.
Okay, but Jonathan.
Yeah,
so,
Jonathan.
Oh, no, wait. So we're going to lower our consumption.
Yeah.
We're going to both. And
It'll
Robbie
probably
will
be a
too.
New Year's resolution for me.
I've been trying to eat less meat.
Already.
Yeah, ever since we had him on.
And how's that been going?
Well, remember, I think I don't eat much meat.
Yeah, that's not true.
I still think I don't. Although I
Okay.
had chicken last night.
What'd you have for lunch today?
I didn't eat anything. I've had 2 cookies today.
Oh, boy. Oopsies. That's not what Foer
I'm gonna,
would want
yeah,
for
I'm gonna replace meat with cookies.
you. Okay, that's a
my new
bad
diet.
plan. Well, then I'm going to eat your belly.
Yeah, you should. It'll taste like cookies.
Yeah. It tastes like cookies and milk.
Yum.
We got to make an actual list, like
Yeah.
he suggested.
Yeah.
Wobby Wob's going to make one.
Yeah,
You're
the
going to
3
make
of
one.
us are gonna make
I think we
one.
should set the goal as New Year's.
Okay, New Year's, we're gonna make our list. We're gonna post it,
Mm-hmm.
and then if people want to make lists, they can do the same.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so you said that when Sedaris was on, that he was talking about book signings and stuff, and that he wrote, "I hope you get raped in the ass."
Something like that.
It was something like that, but not that.
Okay, what was it?
Okay, so he said when he was signing one person's, he must have drawn a picture of Snoopy in a barn or something. And he was like, "Oh, that's Snoopy. Where's Snoopy? Is that a doghouse? No, it's a whorehouse your mother works at. And look at those people in line. What are they doing? Oh, Snoopy's in line to fuck your mother in the ass."
There we go. There we go.
Yeah,
I knew someone was
yeah,
getting
yeah,
fucked
yeah,
in the
yeah.
ass.
But it's not saying "I hope." He
That's
did
true,
not
and he
say
didn't
that.
say the R
Raped.
word.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and I want to really set the record straight.
Yeah.
He did not
Maybe we should just
say that.
cut that part out that I said.
No.
No, okay.
Okay, so you said that in the 30% range of writers on staff in LA are Jewish, and that Jewish people make up 2% of the population. But we don't know.
What percentage of the writer's room?
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't.
There's no stat on that.
There isn't.
But there's a lot of Jewish
Inordinate.
copywriters. There's a lot of them. Yeah.
Disproportionate to the population at large.
I think that's great.
Yeah. So do I.
But in 2013, Pew Research, very trusted brand,
Yeah, it's very.
released a study of the U.S. Jewish population. And I read this in a 2018 article, so my guess is there hasn't been updated research since 2013. So, but it's kind of hard to define Jewish.
Sure.
So it says If you define Jewish only by those who practice the religion,
Oh, fuck that.
Pew counted 4.2 million adult Jewish Americans, or 1.8% of the total U.S. adult population.
Mm-hmm.
The estimated population would grow by 1.2 million if you include people of no religion who consider themselves Jewish in a cultural or secular way and have at least one Jewish parent.
Mm-hmm.
There are another 1.3 million children being raised at least partially Jewish and living in households with at least one Jewish adult. Totaling those groups, you reach 6.7 million Jewish people, all ages, in the U.S. in 2013.
Okay.
Do you know what the percentage is?
6 million, 300 million, 5%?
I don't know.
I think so.
Okay, great.
I think.
Oh, you were right. This is one of those moments.
The rare moments.
Well, this is a rare moment where I was like, oh, he was right. That's cool.
Whoa, fine. I'm excited to hear.
Because you said the Scandinavians have a word for not too much and not too little.
Oh, what is it? Fugi?
It's legume or legume.
Legume.
I don't know. It's Lagom.
Oh, wow. Hey, come in.
Nick's back.
Oh,
Yeah.
dude, I wasn't.
I got another job.
No, I was just coming to tell you we're just a couple of minutes away.
Okay.
Yes.
Nick is telling us we're a couple minutes away from
Yeah,
Dax to
another
go back to
update.
set.
Nick's
And-
in and out of here like a...
I was thinking about it. I just want to give a shout out to all the ladies that gave us love on your post.
Oh, okay. So
Wow,
Nick
did
is...
everyone hear that?
Nick's grateful for the love that was shown of the picture of him. Go ahead, Nick. Just
Yeah,
put it in
tell
your
us.
own words.
Well, I mean, it was really a picture of us, but
Yeah, but mostly you.
never been a social media guy. But if I was, please understand I'd take the time to message everybody individually
Okay.
and let you know that I think you're cute too.
I believe he would do that.
Man, does he...
Message
You're
everyone
expecting Nick to
individually.
only deliver visually? Because a guy that's that handsome generally isn't also going to be a sweetheart.
That's true.
And a gentleman.
That's true.
And funny. Hence why we're going to work out together in the basement.
To tell jokes.
We'll do a lot of things. We'll be nice to each other.
Oh.
We'll be courteous to one another. We'll spot each other. Yeah.
Oh, my
We'll
goodness.
watch each other's form to make sure no one's going to get hurt.
Definitely.
And we'll help limber each other up, maybe even.
Are we going to sell tickets to this?
We should just do a live show where Nick and I lift. All right, well, I'll try to wrap this up in the next 5.
You're all good.
Okay.
So, all right. Cheers, everybody.
Oh, I couldn't love him more. I have such a crush on him.
Okay, legume.
Legume.
Well, you know what? Nick is legume.
Yes.
Not too much and not too little.
That's so true. I go too far. Like I find out where the line is by stepping over it sporadically.
Sure.
I've yet to see Nick step over that line. And he's dancing on fucking razor blades.
doing a good job.
walking a tightrope.
He's
Yeah.
doing a good job. Okay, legume is an overarching concept heavily ingrained in the Swedish psyche, loosely translated as not too much and not too little, just right. Oh, very
Oh.
Goldilocks.
Very Goldilocks. I wonder if that's a Scandinavian story.
I wonder.
I bet it is. It feels very,
White.
yeah, very white.
Legume is about finding a balance that works for you. Yeah,
I'm so the opposite of legume.
that's true.
I'm the antithesis of legume.
The current murder capital of America is East St. Louis, Illinois.
St. Louis, Illinois.
It's called East St. Louis,
Ew.
and it's in Illinois, and it has a murder rate per 1,000 population, 1.13.
So 1.13 people out of every 1,000 will get murdered there. Okay.
Okay. Average number of murders, 30,
In that town annually?
I assume.
Okay.
Oh, okay. I feel so embarrassed
Oh, no.
because when he was telling his story, I assumed that the substitute teacher was a female
Oh, yeah.
and it was a male.
And you're so embarrassed by that.
I am embarrassed. I should be embarrassed. That's embarrassing.
Now,
Very anti-feminist.
what's interesting is there's a couple layers there because one, I was immediately going to say, like, I didn't do that.
You didn't.
But I'd love to do that, you know? Like, I generally I fall into the stereotype.
Yeah.
I think because I knew they were making an explosive device,
Oh.
I thought, like, that's more of a guy teacher
you
thing
did
to do.
another stereotype.
Yeah.
Mm.
Which I'm gonna go out on a limb. You can take me to court over it. I think guys are more into pyrotechnics than women. I just
I'd
do.
say so. Yes.
So, but I do believe now that I think about it that he was saying that the experiment was already set.
I think.
It was his science teachers. You know, I think I went to the stereotype of STEM, where I was like, oh, it's a science teacher, it's probably a guy.
Oh, wow. So in that case, I'm not embarrassed.
Right. Yeah, no, you did it right.
But I didn't because it was a substitute teacher. That's the part that's bad.
I generally do think of substitutes as being women. I feel like there were more female substitutes. But mind you, there were more female elementary school teachers in general than male.
Well, and I will say this. When he's telling me the story, I am picturing my high school physics class. Like, that's the room I have in my head.
Yeah.
And I had all my science teachers were female.
They were?
Yeah.
Well, that's great.
So maybe I'm just extra feminist, and I'm like, only females can do science classes.
But here's a bigger global debate, which is if you're going to take a guess at something, you should guess whatever the percentage favors. You'd be a dumbass not to. Like if I've got money on $1,000, I'm going to guess whether the science teacher is male or female. And I happen to know that 70% of science teachers in America are male. That doesn't make me anti-feminist to say male. That's just statistically the best guess.
Well, yeah, but we don't know that that's true.
We don't know that it's true. We do know that's well, no, but we do know that STEM is drastically more populated by males in college. It's a big issue that we're trying to address.
Trying to get more females in STEM.
Yeah, and then there becomes this, like if you're guessing, it's logical to guess that it would be a male. There's not a moral dilemma there. It's a statistical probability that you're betting on.
I mean, I guess, and also, like I said, every single one of my science teachers were female.
Yeah.
So
that's great. Thank you.
Pause.
This is going to be such a punctuated fact check because we keep leaving the trailer to go shoot scenes and then things happen. And now we're talking about the different things that women can use for their menstrual cycle. And I didn't realize that you can wear undies.
Underwear. If you're listening, I'd love some more.
Oh, wow. And you're saying that you're perennial tampon user, nocturnal diaper wearer.
That's right. I wouldn't call it a diaper.
Okay. Wow, your mouth is packed. What kind of soup did you get? That's another thing. We stopped for soup. Here's the best part about being on a film set is there's food all the time. And now there's a soup bar. And I had a meatball soup. Wobby Wob had meatball soup. What did you have?
Chicken and wild rice.
Oh, was it great?
It was really nice.
Oh, good. I mean, I would give the soup I just ate 8.5. Rob?
I'd say 7 or 8.
Okay.
Dang.
And you're a foodie.
I should have gotten that.
What would you give yours? A 6.5?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I wish I had tried the Cajun potato.
Yeah,
that one smelled nice.
Smells nice.
Yeah.
Now, and we're going to get interrupted in a minute because Armando, who's the sweetest human being in the world, has prepared a special treat that when you visit, I make sure that he makes for you.
Sounds so bougie.
But it's me, not you. You don't come here and go, Armando, can I have the banana wrap?
Crepe?
But he's going to make it. Go into your car. Oh, come in. Banana delivery. Oh, it's Nick.
Oh, my God. Nick's
What are you doing here?
It wouldn't be a comedy if I come 3 times.
That's true. You need to
the
come.
rule of threes.
Yes.
Okay. We'll see you again, Nick.
Later.
What were we saying?
Are you embarrassed for me when you watch me act? Like when you're on set?
No.
And you have the headset. Well, you're embarrassed when I sing or do a character voice.
You're a really good actor. Singer, I can't say that.
No, I'm not
about.
a good singer. I'm not a good singer.
And you're not making crazy faces and staring straight at me when you're acting.
But in that particular scene, I was having to play a little disheveled, I was making some bigger choices.
But you weren't staring straight at me and like you're testing me, you know?
Oh, I get it. So maybe we're onto something. Maybe you're more nervous about that I'm expecting some reaction from you, and you're like, I don't know how to give you what you want.
That might be it.
That's how I feel when people play guitar and sing. You know, and they look right at you while they're doing it.
That's what you're doing.
But again, I don't mind looking at them singing and playing guitar. I start panicking about what my feedback's supposed to be. So it's really my own insecurity.
Yeah, it might be that.
Oh, that could be. We just went on the... Oh, yay! Come in. Oh, yes. The party continues.
Oh, my goodness. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Armando. Oh, you sweet son of a bitch. I love you. Thank you, Armando.
Oh, our treat arrived. Can't eat this on here.
I'm going to take one bite.
No one can listen to this fact check. This is a nightmare.
Yeah.
So I think the last thing we were really talking about was the substitute teacher and feminism.
Is it anti-feminist to just be talking about statistics?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
It's not about my experience with science teachers. It's my experience with substitute teachers, I think. And I would like to know like, what's the percentage of female, male?
I think in general there are more female teachers than males.
Yeah.
And then I think in general there are more male STEM teachers than female STEM teachers. I guess all I'm asking you to do is to do a hypothetical. Let's say it is a fact that there are far more female substitutes, and you thought of a female.
Mm-hmm.
And let's say it's a fact that there's more male STEM teachers. Why is that wrong to guess the one that's in highest percentage? I don't think that's not like a moral dilemma, is it?
No,
Okay.
but you also don't know the percentages.
Do you want to make a bet right now?
I'm not like, I hope it's women.
Kind of, though, right? You hope that there is as many female STEM teachers as male STEM
I
teachers.
would love
That's
for
the
that
desire.
to be the case, but I'm not saying that's what it is. I'm not arguing with you saying there are more female
Right.
or the same amount even. I just don't know what it is,
You don't know, right?
and you don't know either.
No,
And so
I believe that to be true. So when I'm making my guess, it's based on this, what I believe is true. You go to statistically what's most probable
But
in your mind.
I mean, we can find out a stat on that.
Do you want me to do it really quick? Just ask.
Sure.
Yeah, let me just ask. What percentage of high school STEM teachers are male? National data show that 77% of all teachers are women, 9% are Hispanic, 7% are Black. Okay, so right out of the gates, we agree that more women are teachers.
Uh-huh.
There are many more female STEM teachers now than 20 years ago. Over the last 2 decades, the science, technology, engineering, mathematics teacher field has become much more female, slightly more diverse, and more qualified. Perhaps most notably, the percentage of female STEM teachers has dramatically increased from 43% in 1988, which is roughly when his story took place, to 64% in 2012.
64%.
So now you would be smartest to guess it's a female STEM teacher.
Mm-hmm.
But in 1988, 57% of them were males.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
We both feel vindicated,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I do, because I went with the majority.
The majority then.
Yeah, his story was set in 1988
Okay.
or around then.
But you're
in the
also
80s.
wrong.
I'm not wrong.
Yeah, you are, because that person was a substitute teacher, not a science teacher. Substitute teachers are their own category. They're not
They are.
teachers of that subject that just happen to step in. They're their own thing that they just pop in.
Yep. Yeah. But again, it's all about context. So the whole entire conversation stems from us trying to guess what his teacher was.
No.
And yes.
What his substitute teacher was.
Right. Great.
Yeah.
Yeah. But still, all I'm saying is set in 1988. We weren't guessing what his teacher was yesterday.
I would guess in 1988, most substitute teachers were female. That would be my guess.
Yes, but I was thinking, they must have special science substitute teachers
I know,
who would.
but that's not true.
Well, do we know that?
Yeah, for sure.
Do you think they send a non-science? Once you're doing experiments, they'd send like some bozo. Well, it sounds like they did send a bozo.
They did. No, they do. They like, if there's a lesson plan that kids can like sort of do on their own, sometimes a substitute teacher would just like put that out.
Mm-hmm.
But no, they're not like specifically qualified for science or math or anything.
I buy that.
Yeah. Anyway, wow. So Ukraine versus the Ukraine.
Oh, right.
Well, in 1991, Ukraine gained its independence from the Soviet Union in the aftermath of its dissolution at the end of the Cold War. Before its independence, Ukraine was typically referred to in English as the Ukraine, but most sources have since moved to drop the from the name of Ukraine in all uses. So,
We're evolving.
yeah,
It's changed
it has changed.
in people's defense.
It has changed.
Yeah.
In your defense.
I've started saying Ukraine and I hate it.
You do?
Well, yes, because I was raised in an era where you said the Ukraine.
Were you saying it a lot?
Always. Always. I had a lot of Ukrainian neighbors in Santa Monica.
Oh, right. And are we always saying like, oh, my neighbors are from the Ukraine?
I'll say the Ukrainians 2 doors down OD'd the other night, which happened.
Well, that's normal grammar. You'd say the Germans as well. Or
Oh,
the
right. I wouldn't say
Australians.
Ukrainians 2 doors down
Yeah.
OD'd.
Yeah.
That was quite a sight.
That sounds
I watched
really
through their window.
horrifying.
Bree and I were like sitting there watching TV, and all of a sudden I saw flashers out the window, and then I heard people hustling in the little alleyway, and then I went downstairs to take a look, and I was right behind the medics as they went into the apartment. Huge ground floor window. I just watched the whole thing. He was on the ground, completely fucking greenish yellow. Like he was not the color a human should be. And one of the medics said, hold his shoulders, and a guy like held him down. And then he said he's gonna wake up. What was the word he used? Not aggressive, but something like that. Like he's gonna, and he gave him a shot, and he like woke up, and he tried to sit up, and the guy was like holding his thing, and immediately like, you've OD'd on heroin, and they start telling him like what's going on.
Wow.
It was pretty wild.
But he lived.
He lived, yeah.
Scary. I'm scared by that.
Should we call it the OD?
Yeah. Okay, so I mentioned that Harry Potter got rejected by lots of publishers. So it got rejected by 12 publishers.
Oh, wow. They hate that decision.
They definitely do. And she posted some of the rejection letters on Twitter, and I think she like crossed out the names and stuff, but to give people a boost.
Oh, that's great.
Which I loved.
Yeah. Were any of them mean?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
What'd they say? Stupid magic story. Who the fuck cares about a little boy?
I don't know, because I pulled it up really quick, but I couldn't like zoom in and really read it, so people can go look at it.
I.e. your eyes, maybe?
Okay, maybe it was my eyes. But people can look that up. But yeah, I did say a few of them were mean. One of them I think was really mean.
It's tricky, though. It's very tricky because we had the gal on forthcoming episode, the journalist who did Dr. Death.
Oh, yeah.
And there's also a problem with people going like, don't listen to anyone else. Like some people also aren't getting feedback that they suck at something.
Oh, sure.
So that's another thing to evaluate. Some people are belligerent in their conviction and they need either lessons or to pick another thing. So that's part of it too.
You're right.
You know, we hear about the rejection letters that were wrong, but we don't hear about the ones that were right. And probably the vast, vast majority are right.
True, but I still think it's a good message to say, keep going, keep trying, because the more you try, the better you will be.
Yes. But I will say, I think it might be a story that we also love in this country, because if you look at this country, we believe in the American dream, right? Now, we don't care statistically that the vast majority of people do not migrate north of the socioeconomic group they're born into.
Mm-hmm.
But when it happens, we celebrate it so much and we all believe that could be us, that it keeps this system afloat that might not ultimately benefit the majority of people in the country.
Being tenacious is not ever, I think, going to be a bad thing. Like, I think that's a
I
good
agree.
quality. And
what do you think about capitalism in general? The notion of the American dream, that in this country, anyone can become anyone.
I love that.
I love it too as a concept, but if you look at the data and you find out that's not actually true, not everyone can become anyone. That 90-some% of people are just becoming exactly what they were born into. Then you start to have to question whether that premise is actually true in practice.
No. But it's not that you're entitled to become something.
Right.
It's that you have the opportunity to become something. So no one's saying that everyone should just be better than their parents and that's automatic. Personally, I think this is one of our problems in this country, is that there's some white entitlement.
Oh, yeah.
That, you know, the people that are saying, these people are coming and taking our jobs, they feel entitled to those jobs.
Yeah, because their parents had them.
Exactly. And it's like, no. You have to earn your position. You have to work your way up. But the American dream is that there are opportunities.
Yes, but I also don't think that someone who is cleaning houses in LA is working less hard than you and I.
I agree.
So I think people are working really, really hard and they're not ascending the ladder.
Yeah.
And I don't think that people have the same opportunity. I think I had a different opportunity than a black kid did. And
absolutely.
And
those
a Latino
things,
kid. Yeah.
That's the truth.
And so we have to acknowledge that just because Will Smith made it or Barack Obama became president, it would be easy to say, oh, the thing's working. Look. It produced Will Smith. It produced Barack Obama.
Yeah.
And then you could just ignore that it's not working for 90+% of the people.
Some people would say like, well, they did it.
That's my
so
point.
everyone should be, and I totally agree with you. That's crazy.
It's supporting something that the data might not support.
Well, I think both things can happen. Like
Yeah.
we can look at, there's a lot of discrepancy and inequality in this country that needs evening out.
Mm-hmm.
And also, it's good to put out a message of, work hard and stick to your guns at things. And
Chris Rock has the best bit about this. He lives in a big house. He lives in a neighborhood, and Mary J. Blige also lives in that neighborhood. And Jay-Z also lives in the neighborhood.
yeah.
And he said, yeah, America is a place that a black person can end up living in that neighborhood. He said, but I'm the best living comedian.
Mm-hmm.
My neighbor is an average white dentist.
Of course, yeah.
So yes, if you're the best
I know.
in the world at something, sure, you can ascend. But if you're just an average white dentist, you can also live right next to Jay-Z and fucking
Yeah.
the best comedian alive.
I agree that it's so unfair in that way.
I think it's unfair to poor white people too. I don't think it's all just black or white. I think people that grew up in Aaron's neighborhood did not have the shot that I did not have the shot that you did.
Yeah.
There's no system in place to take the kid whose parents are both annihilated drunk and not looking over their homework and not involved. There's no system in place to help that person have the same opportunity I did.
Yeah. Oh, that's it.
That's it?
Yeah.
Well, that
Did
was
it.
a real slalom course of a fact check, right? Bobbing and weaving.
If you've stuck with us through this, thank you.
You deserve a
Gold star.
gold cherry.
Yeah.
All right, I love you.
Love you.